2021 conference virtual summit, which we are producing January 20th and 21st. Get it, 2021. So hopefully we can get everybody at that event too. But got some really great conversations happening there. But on today's episode of TechStrong TV, we start out strong with an interview between Alan and Paul Kurtz of the Cloud Security Alliance. And Cloud Security Alliance recently published a white paper that's based on cloud-based intelligent ecosystems. Paul Kurtz is a CSA board member, and he's also a former national cyber official. And so he and Alan talk about basically what's in the white paper and what it means for IT in general, especially when we're talking about cloud-based intelligent ecosystems. Serious implications there for IT. So that's a really great conversation. I encourage you to take a listen to that one. Next up, he has a conversation with Harpreet Singh, who is the co-founder and co-CEO at Launchable Inc. Now, Harpreet and Kosuke Kawaguchi are going to be speaking at Predict 2021 next week, and they're going to be talking on the future of software testing. But in this conversation, Alan and Harpreet talk about the progress of Launchable Inc. Now, I'm not sure if you remember, but Harpreet is formerly with Atlassian and CloudBees. And Launchable is a test automation platform that helps organizations run the right tests at the right time to dramatically reduce test cycle times in general. So Harpreet and Alan have a talk about what's going on with Launchable and where they see the market heading in 2021. So good stuff. After that, we have a Something Old segment, the most popular episode of the CISO Talk segment. This is a really, really good one, and with good reason that it is the most popular episode, because the topic is on diversity in security and cyber. That is going to be a huge topic this year. I can already tell from the number of organizations that are banging the drum, including our own. So this discussion that Alan and Mitch have with Matt Newfield of Unisys, Olivia Rose of MailChimp, Heather Ricciuto of IBM Security, and Larry Whiteside of ICMCP, as well as Julian Watts of Devo. The conversation that they have on diversity in security and cyber is definitely one worth checking out. It's very, very illuminating, and hopefully offers some food for thought if your organization has even had any questions regarding its diversity efforts. So yeah, definitely give this one a watch. After that, I come on and do my headlines for Thursday, and lots of really interesting stories on the site, so check that out. And then I have a conversation with Saket Modi, who is from a company called Lucidius, and they just rolled out an offering called Safe Me. It is, they call it a one-of-a-kind app that is directed for both consumers and enterprises to measure, quantify, and visualize their security risk posture. Really cool stuff. Definitely worth checking out. And Saket talks a lot about what was the impetus behind the technology and how it can protect both consumers and organizations alike. After that conversation, I then speak with Kelvin Coleman, who is the director of the National Cybersecurity Alliance. He and I have kind of a multi-pronged conversation regarding COVID-19, the pandemic, and its impact on the security landscape at large. And we could not have had a conversation without discussing the recent events at the Capitol with the rioters and the subsequent theft of a lot, well, I don't know if it was a lot, but a certain amount of government property, devices, and data that were taken by the rioters, and what that might mean for federal security and state security in general. So definitely a conversation worth listening to, and hopefully it'll kind of expand your mind a little bit about really how egregious and how wide-reaching the riots last week really have on the impact on national cybersecurity in general. After that, I'll come back on with a preview of the webinars coming up for DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, and Container Journal. Lots of good ones coming up, and we have lots of good ones on demand too. So, and then finally, we have a conversation between Mike Vizard and Mountaintop Data CEO Sky Cassidy. They have an interesting conversation about some of the challenges that IT organizations face as they look to embrace best data ops processes. And that's kind of a different take on a lot of the regular conversations we have about best practices. Data ops normally isn't one of the topics that we really shine the light on, but Mike and Sky Cassidy do have a great conversation about it. So definitely tune in for that one. All right, we have a great broadcast up top, obviously. Lots of great conversations, but we'll go ahead and get started right after this commercial break. All right, welcome back to TechStrong TV. Our first interview today is between Alan Schimmel and Paul Kurtz of the CSA, and talking about the white paper that the CSA just released on cloud-based intelligent ecosystems. Let's give it a look.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another segment for TechStrong TV. Our guest for this segment is Paul Kurtz. Paul is a well-known fellow in the cyberspace and is on the board of the Cloud Security Alliance, or CSA. And he's going to, well, we've got a couple of things to talk about today, but in any event, Paul, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Alan, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. It's great to have you on. Paul, as I mentioned, I think your name's pretty well known in the cyber world, but for people who aren't familiar, why don't we give them a little bit of your background, a little bit as a board member, maybe a little CSA background as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So, yeah, my background, I spent a lot of time in the national security space, and in particular, looking at intelligence-related challenges that would go to counterterrorism, countering weapons of mass destruction, and cybersecurity. And I picked up the cybersecurity portfolio at the White House in 2001 after working on the events of 9/11 on a counterterrorism front. And I've become fascinated with this idea of how do we actually fuse intelligence and bring it together for cyberspace. So along the way, I had the opportunity to work with Dave Cullinane, formerly at eBay, and Jim Rivas, and Dave and Jim came together and formed a Cloud Security Alliance, and they asked if I would be willing to be a founding board member. So here we are 11 years later, and CSA is now a global organization, has chapters, of course, across the United States and around the rest of the world. And their focus is, how do we secure the cloud, so to speak? And obviously over the past 10 years and change, there has been a great transformation and migration into the cloud. So we're also, just as long as we're talking today about CSA too, I want to welcome Alina Armstrong, who just joined as president, working with Jim at CSA. And we couldn't be happier about having Alina here because, of her experience as editor of SC Magazine, and she knows the vendor community, she knows the CISO community, and I think can bring a good shot of juice into the CSA organization.
Absolutely. So before we jump into what we really want to talk about, which is a white paper that you guys have done, just a couple notes. First of all, Paul, thank you for your service to the country over the years. After 9/11, it was a sort of a, like, how they talk about after the Big Bang, that big expansion, faster than the speed of light, perhaps. After 9/11, there was a great expansion of our awareness and capability around cyber at that level. And you there in the White House helping lead that charge was fundamental to it. So thank you for that. Number two, I'm just trying to think. I was at the first CSA announcement at RSA. Jim was there. I think Chris Hoff was there. A few other folks. Was it just 11 years ago? It feels like longer.
Well, I think I think we're in year 12 now. But one of the curious things about what Jim and Dave did is they put together, so to speak, the first guidance or standard for cloud security first. And then they rolled out the document and said, all right, everybody jump in and peer review this document and let's make it better.
Right.
And lots of times people form an organization and then they bring together the people and say, okay, where do we start? Let's start writing. And 2 years later it comes out and it's kind of a train wreck. But in this case, the strategy for the genesis for starting up the organization was spot on, and CSA continues to do that in one way, shape, or form. The paper that we're going to talk about a little bit is some of the same the same methodology. In other words, where you get some people together, you put a document out and for peer review and see what bites and see people jump in and try to make it a better product. And I think it's a great methodology.
It is. I remember when CSA first came out, the whole idea of the work groups who would meet independent, they had several different work groups going on different things. I love the idea of that, and it kept people involved. A lot of times these organizations become sponsor-led, who wrote the biggest check. But by having the work groups with real people in them, and you could dial in, anyone could join the work group, and kind of, this is before we all lived on Zoom, right? And you could dial in and participate. It was a great thing. Now, Elena, I also know Elena about 20 years. From her time at SC Magazine when I was at Still Secure. And I don't think you could have picked a better person for that role, because I often wondered, how the heck does Jim do all this? Jim Reeve is, God bless him, he's out there all the time. Back when we all traveled, I would see him at events all over the place and we'd chit chat a bit. And, it was in many ways a Herculean effort trying to, do this. So I'm also excited by what Elena can bring to the party, and also, more hands working it, and I think it'll work well.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. And real quick, I think it's interesting because Jim's leadership is, you have a lot of leaders who are like, we're going to go this way, we're going to take this mountain, we're going to go there, and Jim's style is more of grassroots like. So in other words, and this paper is a perfect example of it. I was giving a presentation in Washington after COVID broke out, and it was the federal summit, and we had a grand total of 7 people in the room. We were covering it virtually as well, but I made this presentation on redefining intelligence. And Jim came to me afterwards and he said, Paul, what about forming a working group and seeing if we can put flesh on the bones for this whole concept and get the idea out there and see if we can get people talking about it? And I was like, Sure, I'd love to do that. And honestly, Alan, this is the first paper that I've done in a CSA context. Obviously, I've been a board member all the way along, and I was thrilled to have the opportunity to work with Jim and his team, and he's got like John Yo and several other people who are working with him. They just do fabulous work.
Absolutely. So we've referenced this paper now a few times. Let's let the audience in on what it is we're talking about. Paul, what's the paper on? What's it about?
Yeah, it's what I wanted to do is my focus really since 9/11, and it's, so to speak, it's almost been renewed within the past 10 days, is
Unfortunately
on the Hill. Yeah, is how do we bring together information effectively to combat the cyber threat, and recognizing that there's lots of good information out there about the problem, whether it be external intelligence or coming from those tools you're running inside the enterprise, and that we really haven't thought strategically about bringing that data together. And that was precisely the problem with 9/11. We weren't able to fuse the data. And Alan, this morning, literally today, it broke that there was data inside the Norfolk FBI field office about what might happen on Capitol Hill that was not brought together with other data. So it's a persistent problem on the security side, but in cyberspace, it's a more complex problem, I would argue, because you have all these tools to been deployed to secure enterprises, pumping out data in different formats and a lot of alerts coming out. Meanwhile, you have all this other intelligence that is coming from external intelligence providers. It could be proprietary or open source. And how do you fuse this data together? And we haven't been able to do that. And the paper really tries to help the reader redefine intelligence and say, we need to be able to reason through all of this data, fuse it and draw conclusions from it, be able to make decisions far more rapidly as to what's going on inside the enterprise and between companies, and fold it back into our defense systems. And the paper kind of methodically walks through redefining intelligence, creating, if you will, a cyber memory for each enterprise. We looked at, for example, T-AI. It's a book by Michael Kanan that came out last year, which really unpacks, what does intelligence look like? And intelligence is basically building memory. It's not just that you have a source overseas that's telling you X, Y, Z is going to happen. How do you reason through the data? And the sort of paper goes down that road and offers a framework for enterprises to begin to put together a program to bring all these various data feeds together. And it's not about a single product. It's about a paradigm shift in thinking about, oh yeah, if we're really going to solve this problem, we have to solve this fusion problem inside the enterprise.
Sure. So, Paul, when I look at this issue, the scale and then their scale, right?
Yeah.
When we look at the mission of government agencies, for instance, you brought up the Capitol insurrection or whatever. I don't even know what to call it. But when you're talking about an apparatus the size of the federal government, the resources that need to be tapped into, the Norfolk FBI office, there's dozens of FBI offices, but that's just the FBI. There's the whole national defense. There's intelligence, there's foreign, there's third parties in other nation states. I mean, it's boggling. I don't know how one gets their hands around that. But when we bring that scale down to the enterprise, and today's enterprises are not small, right? I mean, we all agree, not quite the mission that we have maybe in the federal government space, but it's a daunting mission. And I was talking to someone from a company, I don't want to mention their name. He was the CISO, and now he's going to be the CIO/CISO. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking to myself, how does one do that? right? Is that a good move, right? In terms of being able to gather all my intelligence resources and harness my resource, harness my troops, for lack of a better word, to respond to threat and risk. Is that the future for us, or is that an anomaly? I don't know. I don't know.
I think SolarWinds has shaken things up a bit, because the tool that was exploited was more of an IT management tool.
Yeah.
And so the logic of making sure the CIO is now turbocharged with maybe a far stronger understanding of security may be one of the developments that occurs, and kind of, if you will, do we need to rethink through the structure? But having said that, my belief is that, look, we've been, if you go into a SOC and you talk to the analysts that are there, they're battling a lot of fatigue. It's tedious. It's data wrangling, and you've got some really skilled people that have gone out and gotten all sorts of certifications, and there's supposedly like 3 million job openings for security related people. And when you sit back and look at this, and you're like, there's got to be an integration automation here, because we're not going to be able to operate at scale, because unless we start leveraging the very computers we're trying to secure in order to neck down the problem. And so this is where it's not saying stop developing tools or the tools are bad. This isn't an anti-tool war. It's to say, no, let's better leverage all the data coming out of these tools. So if you're running a platform like Splunk, or you're a platform like QRadar, and you got a case management system, or a system for orchestration, you can bring that data together without having to use so many humans to do the tedious work. It's not going to it's going to allow those really hyper skilled people to work on big problems, not data wrangle and try to put data together quickly. And even the visualization challenges, Alan, are coming to a head. We used to be able to put a constellation of connections on a screen, but it's too darn complicated.
Like looking at a map of the universe.
Yeah,
you really tell one
perfect.
10 billion stars from another.
Yeah. So how do you do that? And a lot of it becomes API. So an API driven structure where you can basically automatically fuse and automatically update these defense systems and manage to challenge far more effectively.
Paul, this is not unlike the challenge that we've seen in DevOps over, let's say, the last 6-7 years, which was to develop software better at scale.
Yeah.
We had to automate. There were testing, even some security testing. The whole integration delivery process had to be automated, because otherwise you would never be able to do the kinds of things we're doing. But at the same time, I always knew, and that's what got me involved in DevOps 8-9 years ago, was that if that's what's going to happen with the software, security has to automate to keep up.
Absolutely.
Right? The amount of data flow, big data and all of that. There was a time, I remember 15 years ago, and the company still secure I was at, we were playing with the rings in Linux that would allow us to inspect packets at greater than a gigabit a second, right? And you had to make some fundamental changes to the way Linux operated, because we were using a Linux system. And and we were racking our brains over this. You look at today's flows, right? And what you need to keep up with, and it's not just packet inspection, as you mentioned. It's the amount of data that's coming in through Splunk and other log, not just analyzers, aggregators, and then we can't have humans doing the analysis. We'll never find out. It's a losing proposition. There's one other level, though, I want to, and I think the paper addresses this as well. So up here we have just the colossus of the U.S. government's needs. Then we have the enterprise, which is an enterprise in every stretch of the word. It's not small. There's an in-between section, though, where enterprises need to share data for the good of all. And there comes a point where I think we as in cyber have to realize it's not about one enterprise's competitive advantage vis-a-vis another enterprise. It's for the common good that we need to share this data and intelligence and analysis, because we're kind of all in it together. The SolarWinds is a great example, right? 450 of the Fortune 500.
Yep.
And I know the paper, I think, talks a little bit about that, correct?
It does. It gets into this whole concept of, if you create a cyber memory or an ecosystem inside of an enterprise, and there other enterprises start doing the same, then you can very seamlessly move data back and forth about ongoing issues and challenges. And I've spent a lot of time looking at the information sharing problem, going back, PDD 63, which set up the whole idea of a ISAC, an information sharing and analysis center.
Sure.
Kind of really dating myself on that. But if you look at that, what we found out in looking at the problem is the part of the challenge to sharing between companies was they couldn't bring a CISO couldn't necessarily bring all the data together and fuse it for him or herself in order to send it off elsewhere to share it with others. What would often happen would be, at the bar, people would have a drink and they might share some information that way. And obviously that doesn't scale. And so there's now that recognition of integration, automation, and being able to work with other work with sharing groups. And I've seen sharing groups, say, for example, now that have set up a system. The retail sector has set up a system where they have a repository of data, and all of their members can essentially plug into that data and check it on a continuous basis and bring the data back into their system as they see fit. And it's all correlated along the way. And I think that's where we're heading. We've seen, say, for example, the city of LA with an initiative to pull public and private sector together in order to share data. We've seen the Port of LA doing it. We've obviously got sharing centers in all the major sectors of the economy. And as you rightly said, Alan, I think SolarWinds just drives home the point that we need to work more closely together. What I found fascinating is in the news yesterday, as they're going through and doing the forensic work on SolarWinds, now they're uncovering that, well, the adversary in this case was actually reusing some code that we saw a couple of years ago. And this is why it is so important to create that cyber memory inside of the enterprise, so you can look back and understand, wait a minute, we've seen this before. Or the frenetic look of, okay, everybody call in the analysts and call in the forensics experts and try to piece this together. If you've created a memory over time, that memory itself of what's happened inside your enterprise becomes incredibly valuable. And if we have that type of activity as a methodology within enterprises, it's going to make it that much easier to work between enterprises, and not just one sector at a time, but between sectors as well.
Agreed. Paul, I think we probably are over time, I'm going to guess, but we're running right there. We didn't even, where can people get this paper?
They go to CSA's website, and where all their research is posted. And just if you just plug in the word, probably to make it simple for people, ecosystems, and it should pop up. And you can read it there. And I think one of the things, if I can say, Alan, we would like to do some follow-on work. So what are other areas of research if we're buying into this idea of the development of intelligent ecosystems? Say, for example, what is the role of AI? What is the role of blockchain? Are these repositories of data become something more? And what is it? What is this paradigm looking like 5 and 10 years down line of going where of actually working more in lockstep with each other on these problems rather than enterprise by enterprise? And I'm hopeful that we can get in, hopefully with your viewers, we can get other people who want to put their hand up in the air and say, oh wait, no, you should look at this problem, and find other leaders who want to stand up and push this concept forward.
Agreed. Let's do something about that. Paul, for people watching this who say, yeah, no, I'd like to get involved in that, I'd like to do it. How do they do it off the CSA website? Is there a particular link they should follow, or a form they should fill out, a contact? How do they get involved?
Well, there's a couple of ways. I think, on most, on every paper that comes out, if you want to join into a discussion, you just say, list me. I would like to be a reviewer for a paper. And if you just go on to the CSA website and look at research, you can easily sign up to be a part of the research initiative. And folks can reach out to me as well. And I'd be happy to connect them with the team at CSA that are there full time.
Great, man. Paul, thank you so much for coming on and enlightening us a little bit today. I appreciate it. It certainly is interesting times, as usual, in the cyber world. Yeah. As if 2020 wasn't enough. Yeah. But hey, man, good luck with everything at CSA, though, with Elena coming on. Regards to Jim and the rest of the team, we're looking for great things in 2021 from CSA and from you. Thank you very much for joining us on TechStrong TV today.
Alan, thanks for having me. We appreciate it.
All righty. Paul Kurtz, board member CSA here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with another guest in a moment.
Greetings, Earth people. The year 2020 has been most illogical. It has taken a worldwide pandemic to stop us from our traveling, from attending our conferences. But that same pandemic has accelerated digital transformation to the highest levels of warp speed. What does 2021 hold in store for us? But we will make our best guess at Predict 2021. Find out our most logical predictions at the 3rd annual Predict Virtual Summit taking place on January 21st and 22nd of the new year. Hear from futurists, leaders, and thinkers in the fields of DevOps, cloud native, cyber, and digital transformation. Register now at predict2021.com to see the already announced lineup. Admission is free, but it is limited. Sponsorships are available. Don't miss out on the most logical look at 2021. Predict 2021. Live long and prosper.
All right, welcome back. Next up is a conversation between Alan and Launchable co-founder and co-CEO Harpreet Singh, talking about Launchable's progress so far and where he sees the landscape in general. So let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on another segment for our TechStrong TV show. My guest for this segment is Harpreet Singh. Harpreet is one of the co-founders of Launchable Inc., because it's launchableInc.com. There is a website, launchable.com, that you might have visited. It's pretty popular. The company's website is launchableInc.com. So many people are referring to them already as Launchable as well. Anyway, Harpreet, welcome to TechStrong TV. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Very nice to be here.
So Harpreet, as we were talking off camera, of course, I remember interviewing KK when it was KKNU.
Right.
The very first day you guys had announced Launchable Inc., right? And
Right.
what you were looking to do was still kind of in beta, or not even, I wouldn't even call it a beta. It was still sort of in research
Yeah,
mode, right?
exactly.
And,
Exactly.
it's been a few months now, though. Some news has come out. I know KK presented at our DevOps Experience Summit,
Hmm.
and you guys have made a decent amount of progress there. Before we get into the progress, though, Harpreet, I want to, for people who maybe haven't seen any of this that
Hmm.
I've just mentioned, are not familiar with the Launchable and what you guys are trying to do with LaunchableInc.com.
Mm.
Let's start there. Give us the background, the history. Maybe include a little bit of your own history in there,
All
and
right.
we'll go from there.
Sounds great. So, Launchable Inc. really started from this, one question that I think every engineering leader faces from his team or her team, which is, you have a small change. Like I have a small change as a developer. Why do I need to run all the tests? Why, tests take a very long time, and it takes uh, it it takes a long time to get through them. So why do I need to run them? And so we started looking at this problem, and we figured we could look into this and like help engineering teams optimize it, right? And the background for this is Kosuke and me have been in this DevOps CI/CD space for a dozen years and developer productivity space for more than a dozen years. And we realized that what slows companies and teams down is like this, long testing cycles. And we wanted to come in and help teams optimize that and accelerate consequently. So what Launchable does, quote unquote, is test what matters. We figure out what's important, what's the right test, and help you run those right tests. So one way that I'm recently using talking about this is like insurance, right? Its tests is like, tax. You have to run all of them to kind of get to a place where like you haven't let any bugs through. But if Launchable is like an insurance service, we figure like what the right coverage is at the right risk level and help you make that right trade-off. Right? So that's sort of what Launchable is, and a very, very quick background on why we started the company. About myself, um, so before Launchable, I was the head of product at Atlassian Bitbucket. So I was there for about a year and a half. And before that, I was at a company called CloudBees, who are the leaders in DevOps. And I was with them for about 8 or 9 years from inception. So I headed product and design there. And I really sort of, my specialty was helping sort of build the DevOps Jenkins kind of monetize open source business. So that's what I did. And prior to that, I was at Sun Microsystems, and I was a product manager there. And I saw Jenkins there, and I figured like, this is something that the market needs. Why aren't people talking about this? And I essentially sort of bet my career there and said like, let's take this to market. And so that's what I've done. And I was an engineer before that, and so on.
Understood. So Harpreet, and again, I already know the story, but not everyone out here does, right?
Yeah.
So, yourself, look, you ran product, helped make CloudBees the leader in DevOps CI/CD. Kosuke KK is your co-founder, the founder of the Jenkins project, CTO, chief scientist at CloudBees. Clearly, the both of you have had, and then your experience at Atlassian, the both of you have had great insight and communication with lots and lots of organizations who are, trying to do more, be faster, automate more, raise quality, all of the above. And so it gave you both a really unique perspective into where were the real bottlenecks, right? Where were the real problems? And that has kind of allowed you to focus in that with Launchable. But if you wouldn't mind sharing a timeline, if you will, with milestones or what significant points along the way. Because a lot of people in our audience, right, they dream about starting a company. They're really smart engineering kind of folks, developers, business folks. And they, everybody, I think, at some point entertains the idea of, I've got a great idea. I think I see where there's a problem. But they don't truly understand what goes into how do you, start a company to help solve problems like this. So share with us a little bit how the genesis, the milestones, the timelines, if you will, of how you start with you recognize the issue and then just kind of chip away at the stone and trying to solve these issues and wind up with hopefully a product and a company out of it.
Right. So I'd like to say, these are like very discrete steps. One day the light bulb goes off and you have this idea and then you kind of start executing on it. But that's not how it quite works, right? So so there's no specific date as such where I can go back and say this is where the idea really started. If I go back, maybe a couple of years back, talking to people at CloudBees, we're doing a lot of Jenkins, we're talking about CI/CD pipelines. We made CloudBees #1 there, and then we see in the market there is once an idea becomes successful, funding comes in, and we see a plethora of pipeline companies or CI/CD companies jumping mushrooming out there, right? And it goes okay, this market is mature. If you have one new startup being forming per day, it's likely we've hit maturity. And so where do we go next? So Kosik and me kind of are really good friends, so we keep going back and forth on these. And one of our things was as execs, we sat in various conversations and we saw the sales and marketing really is data driven, right? You can actually go in and talk to an enterprise sales leader and he'll tell you okay, it takes me 4.5 months to get a sales rep productive. And after that, we'll start showing you X amount of revenue or so on. And marketing has something similar. And so on the engineering side, if you go in and talk to people, it's well, engineering is part science, part craft. And so you're not as data driven as the other organizations. So we were somewhat embarrassed and we wanted to bring in the rigor of data to engineering. And so that's where, we started off with. And then as we started thinking about this, we realized that we were helping companies go through these DevOps transformation, and it takes them months and years to kind of go through these. You're running DevOps.com. I'm sure you're hearing this all the time. We are on this cultural transformation that is, 8 or 9 months down, and we don't quite have the results to show for it, and so on. All that is good work. And this example predates, my next example predates COVID, but I used to say okay, the patient is sick, and with DevOps transformation, we are telling them, go to the gym, work out, spend 8 or 9 months doing this, then you'll get healthy. But the patient really has a headache going. All he needs is a medicine, right? All he needs is a vaccine at this point. And that's what, unshackles them. And we were looking at what are those key problems? And we found testing is not being looked at from that perspective. And as we found out, we talked to a lot of people, and we realized that slow test feedback, what tests to run are the key problems that engineering teams face. And we circled around this for a few months, and then we realized hey, there is something here. And that's the point where we started thinking about forming the company. And we talked to a few people. We decided to form the company. It so happens that because of KK's and my background, we're somewhat outliers. We were able to raise a seed round, much earlier than typically people would. And so we started thinking about starting the company last June or July, and in October we had formed the company and we had raised a seed round. So that's sort of where we were at. And the first few months of this journey has been to sort of keep our intuition aside and really go and talk to a lot of people and say, like, is our intuition actually matching what we are saying now that we've dedicated our entire working hours to it? And it seems to be matching up, right? So what we've done in the last few months is actually go in and talk to a lot of customers, validated our key hypothesis, validated our algorithms, right? So this is a machine learning company, right? Kind of going back to data, we realized that we can use machine learning and data at this point to go in and solve the testing issues. So that's sort of where we've ended up with.
Okay. So great background stuff. We've got that kind of foundation laid.
Mm-hmm.
As we sit here now, it's Thanksgiving week, November, almost the end of November. Where is the company now, and where do you see, what do you, not long-term, because who knows what, over the next, let's say 6 months, a year at most, how do you see this progressing? And then I'd like you to also, if you can kind of weave it in there, Harpreet, our audience at home, how can they interact with this? How can they kind of help the mission that you and KK are advancing, but also how can they help themselves?
Right.
By maybe getting in front of this.
Yeah. So great question. So I realize I haven't really talked like what the company specifically does, right? So what we do is, if you have like tests and these tests are automated, we can come in and find what percentage of the test to run to give you the same level of confidence as you normally do, right? So we call this test what matters. Another way to think about this is we eliminate waiting time from tests, right? So it really hones into the problem, like developers are waiting on slow test feedback, or they don't quite know what test to run. We kind of go and solve those problems for them. So that's where we are starting off with. Where we are as a company today is we have a good number of, what you would call design partners who work with us that helps us validate, that our approach and our algorithm works. And a number of them are piloting us today, right? So where we are headed towards, and so where we are today is we are at this point where we are offering early access program to people. So you can come in, can talk to us, we can connect you to the service, and in a few weeks, you can trial the service out. Once the machine learning algorithm learns about your environment, you can start using the product. So if I go, 3 months ahead, we will be looking at sort of GAing this product that is, generally available to teams out there. And if you look like 6 to 9 months, a year ahead, you're essentially just kind of, building more and more polish on this and sort of improving the algorithm further. So that's sort of where we are at today. Now, to your question, how can people help themselves today? So a lot of people that we talk to, Alan, like they have this problem. It's like we're waiting on tests to take some time. Now, if you're a big company, it may translate as, well, my developers wait a few hours to a few days, right? And that's a lot of time. And if you're a small company and you're like looking at this and going like, I have 30-minute tests, but it takes me like 20 minutes, if I could reduce that to 5 minutes, my developers could go much, much faster. So if your sort of listeners are in that sort of camp, they don't have much in terms of solutions today. And it would be the right time to engage with us and connect with us and, figure out whether the algorithm works for them, right? So that's sort of the call to arms would be to come back and contact us to, try the product out.
So let's be clear, though, make sure we lay the breadcrumbs correctly. They should go to launchableinc.com to the website. And where is there a place on the website where it says?
There is a button called Get Early Access. And you can, press on the button to get early access invite there, and we'll contact you. Or you can, email info@launchableinc.com that you want to try out, and you'll be reach out back to you about that. The website actually talks about a few things. We have like a few case studies that we've done with customers. There's a white paper that helps you understand sort of how the algorithm works and so on. So they can look at that, sort of, educate themselves. I think the key thing here is this notion of how do you use what we call predictive test selection? Like, how do you predict what tests to run? And that's sort of a new branch. So people might need to sort of get their heads wrapped around the concept. So the website actually calls some of those pieces out for them.
Excellent. Excellent. And does it make a difference how big the organization is? Is there a particular size or verticals that you guys are looking to focus in on first, or is it not important?
It's actually not important. So the beauty of what we've done is our approach is tech agnostic. So you could be on any programming language, you could be on any platform, and we would work for you. What we just need is the tests need to be automated, such that this becomes part and parcel of the workflow. And what we've seen is we have like people who are like the big car companies in our product, in our design partner program, and we have like one people startup in our design partner program. So the key question to ask yourself is like, are my developers waiting a long time that I should be optimizing for, right? And if you have that problem, you can come back to us, right?
I saw an interesting study the other day, last week. I was talking about it with someone. The fact of the matter is, according to this survey anyway, when we look at enterprises, only about 25% of testing is automated. And the interesting thing is, like 7-8 years ago, it was 25%. So even with the onset of DevOps and everything around automation and continuous testing, we haven't seen a corresponding spike or rise in the amount of testing which is automated. It's remained relatively static these last few years. So, one may ask, well, before I improve the automated testing you're doing, how can we get you to do more automated testing, right? Or why aren't we doing more automated testing? What's your thoughts on that?
That's a very interesting point. It could very well be an hour-long conversation in itself. So just highlighting a few things.
Yeah. Keep it short, and we'll jump into it on another conversation, maybe. But if you can, I mean, just
I recently did a webinar. It's on our website, where I was talking about like the state of like testing and DevOps, right? And I think Gartner has a similar number, about 25%, but their prediction is by 2023, 75% of the organizations will have automated testing. So that's what they see the market to go to. And why has this been so static? I think it has a couple of things. One has been the maturity of CI/CD itself, right? For something like automated testing to work, you need your Jenkins pipeline to be set up. You need that entire end-to-end workflow to be set up. And that's what has happened in the last 4 or 5 years. So, people, it's the same set of people who are making those choices. And so they are optimizing for building that pipeline before they go into like automation. The second, so I think the market is getting to the place where you'll need more and more automation, and you will have more and more automation. Actually, we are talking to somebody who are like, okay, we are automating our services in the next 4 weeks and we'll be back to you. And they were back kind of doing that conversation. The next thing is really the challenge has been like, people have finite amount of time, right? And it's like, what challenges do you pick up, right? And this was one of our underlying philosophy as well, is like, you cannot go in and tell these DevOps team to go hire 5 more people to write automated tests. So what needs to happen is you need to give back their time, right? So we are talking to a few organizations where just because we could reduce their entire cycle time by 40%, right? You can now use that 60% resources to go do something else. And in their case, in some cases, it is like, we need to write more tests, or we need to fix these flaky tests that we never had time on, or we need to go write some features, right? So that's sort of like, you're hitting like one of our sort of key thinking behind is like, once we give back these time, you can go in and clean house, because you have that time now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Harpreet, I tried to keep these to 20 minutes. We're a little over.
Okay.
But we're going to need to continue that conversation.
Yeah.
And we will come back to it. But I want to leave people with the call to action here, which is go to launchableinc.com, hit join our, what was the button say? Join our program or?
Early invite. Early invite,
enroll in it, check out the case studies, the webinars and everything else. It's refreshing to see someone or a new company take a big swing at the plate to fix, right?
Yeah,
fundamental issues. And so keep us posted. We'll have you back on soon. Enjoy the holiday. Say hello to KK for us.
Yeah, will do. Thank you very much.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Harpreet Singh here, CEO. Is it CEO, co-founder?
Co-CEO, co-founder.
Co-CEO, co-founder. Launchable Inc. That's launchableinc.com here on TechStrong. We'll be right back with our next guest.
Thank you.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we have the most popular episode of CISO Talks on tap for you. A conversation that Alan has with Mitch Ashley and Matt Newfield, as well as Olivia Rose, Heather Riccudo, Larry Whiteside, and Julian Waits. That's a huge lineup today, talking about diversity in security and cyber. So let's take a look.
Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel, and welcome to another episode of CISO Talk. For those of you who are not familiar, CISO Talk's a bi-weekly video show where we spend, 40, 45 minutes diving into a specific area of security that we find interesting. We have some regulars on the show, and then we have sort of a rotating panel of stars. Let me introduce you to our regulars first, and then we're going to introduce you to our stars. Can't get any more regular than this guy. He's my co-host. He's the CISO for Unisys, Matt Newfield. Hey, Matt, welcome.
Thank you so much, Alan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yep. Joining Matt and I is our usual sidekick, well, more than sidekick, but another co-host, Mitchell Ashley, who is CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. Mitchell, welcome.
Thank you much. Excited about our panel today.
I am too. Joining us, and he's also become sort of a card-carrying regular at this point, is our friend Julian Waits. Julian is general manager of cyber at Devo. And Julian, you know what? Give him a little bit of your background.
Sure. As you said, I'm general manager for cyber and public sector at Devo. I'm also the chairman of ICMCP, the International Consortium of Minority Cybersecurity Professionals, based on the topic that we're talking today about diversity in cyber. And I'm a budding, jazz musician who wishes I could play my saxophone better.
Well, for those of you who've looked at past episodes, Julian always has a saxophone in the back, but he's not his usual.
Episode to play it for us.
Yeah,
that'll
be another episode. Yes, Mitchell will play guitar, Julian will play sax, and Matt, you and I'll listen. Let me introduce you to our stars of today's panel, though. First, we're going to introduce Olivia Rose. Olivia, a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm really glad to be here, and I love speaking about this topic. A little bit of background about me. I've been in this field for a long time, for about 18 years, and I love security, and I don't think I could ever do anything else. I'm most recently the CISO over at MailChimp, a global marketing platform.
I think most of us are familiar with MailChimp, and that's a big responsibility at MailChimp. Next, we're going to go to our friend Larry Whiteside. Larry, if you wouldn't mind a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So Larry Whiteside, I've been in this industry for longer than I care to count, because then that will tell my age versus the lines on my face. And so I am the CTO of an organization called CyberClan, but most importantly, I am the co-founder and president of ICMCP, the organization that Julian mentioned. So that's why I love talking about diversity. It is literally, besides cyber and my family, it is literally the number one passion for me on a daily basis.
I think you're going to love this panel then. And then last but not least, we have Heather Risudio. And Heather, if I mispronounce your last name, I apologize. I'm going to give you a chance to correct it and talk a little bit about yourself.
Sure. It's Heather Ricciuto, and I am a long-term IBMer. In fact, I'm what we call a lifer. And what I do at IBM these days is lead academic outreach for IBM Security, which essentially means that I evangelize the need for cybersecurity skills around the world. And I also am heavily involved in women's diversity initiatives at IBM, specifically in the area, or most particularly in the area of cybersecurity. So, for example, we're a proud sponsor of ICMCP.
Yeah.
That's just one of the many things that we get involved with.
Great. You know, I can't think of a better panel. Our associate producer Jody actually helped put this together with Heather Rock, and what a great panel to discuss. As many of you have mentioned, today's topic is diversity in the security space. We were talking a little bit off camera, and I don't want to sound I don't want a mission accomplished moment here, but we have made progress. We have made progress in this industry in diversity from where we were, let's say, in 2003 or 2004, where I think, frankly, if a woman showed up at a cyber conference, she had to really kind of mind her P's and Q's, and it wasn't pretty in a lot of ways, and it was somewhat demeaning. And quite frankly, people of color, it was, you just didn't see people of color other than maybe Southeast Asians, right? And that's changed. And I think a lot of it's changed because some of the people on our panel, but there's still a long way to go. There's still a very, very long way to go. And that's just cybersecurity, right? I think when we look at the broader IT spectrum, there's a lot of work that needs to be done there as well. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this, right? Larry, I know you have strong feelings on what some of those are.
I do.
So take it away, man, and we'll go from there.
So something we have to think about. So a lot of the dialogue that we have around the lack of diversity in the field of cybersecurity, people are like, we've got to do more to get people into the field. We've got to offer more opportunity. We've got to try and hire more diversity. But a large part of the reality is we've got to educate better about the field of cybersecurity, right? So, and when I say that, it's not about making cybersecurity a bigger curriculum. It's about going into middle schools, going into high schools in underserved and underprivileged areas to let them know that this is a career field that exists that they can go into and be successful. It's a career field that exists out there for them to explore. A large part of the reason that we don't have the diversity that we hope for, especially when it comes to minorities, is because there's a lack of understanding or knowing that this field even exists, right? If we look today from where we were 10 years ago, right? So I started this dialogue a little early. If you think back 10 years from that, 10 years ago, and think about high school graduates that were graduating high school at 18. How many people, because a lot of times you go into career fields that you see and know about or have experience about through your network. So if you think about underserved communities, 10 years ago, how many of them had a network of people, right? Because social media didn't exist, right? So how many of them had a network of people that they could see and mimic that in cybersecurity? There was very few. So they didn't know coming out of high school. So now those people are hitting their late 20s to early 30s. And we're wondering, well, why are they not in cybersecurity? They knew about IT, right? So there are some of them that went into IT and then later, after going into IT, started transitioning to cyber. But at that age of 18, they just didn't know about it. And so we've got to do a better job back there, right? Do we also have to do a better job here, right? Meaning here today, do a better job recruiting more diversely? Do we have to do a better job of looking outside the walls or looking outside our normal processes of recruiting? Yes. Do we have to do a better job building better job descriptions that are going to be more open, right? A lot of people don't think if you put college degree is required on a job application, on a job description for a role, you have automatically excluded a large percentage of diverse candidates, because the likelihood that people coming from underserved communities is going to college is here compared to their white counterparts, right? So you've automatically excluded a number of people. If you put, right, 1 to 3 years experience required for this entry-level role, you've just excluded a large percentage of diverse candidates, because the likelihood of a woman or a minority getting an internship to get that year of experience that you need based on that job description is here compared to their counterparts that's here, right? And so we've got to start holistically thinking better about these different aspects of how we build and write job descriptions, of what we do to educate youth at a younger age, that not necessarily about the technical details of the field, but that the field exists, and allow them to start creating the mental muscles that they need, right, of analytical thinking to be successful as they move forward and get older and start having to get into the specific technical skills that are needed for this field. It's those things that we have to start putting some focus on and building in order to make the long-term change happen better. But today, the right now is more about recruiting differently, right? It's more about writing job descriptions differently and doing things so that we are thinking outside the box of how we get better, diverse talent in.
You know, I think, Larry, you bring up really amazing points. And it's from my personal experience, I've hired a lot of people, and I always focus on hiring minorities. And I've been very successful in that standpoint, because I think it's important to do everything that you mentioned, but it's also important to focus on anybody can learn anything. When I started in 2002 in this field, I was in marketing for ISS. And I very quickly learned how to be a consultant, and I moved into security consulting. You can learn anything, and you can teach anybody anything. So I always look for people who are what I call bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. They're excited, they're thrilled about it. They didn't even go to college. I don't care. I don't care if you went to college or not. I graduated, but that's because I was lucky. I was fortunate to go. But do I think that puts me ahead of anybody else? No, it doesn't. So I always look for certain traits in people where I can teach them, and it take 3 to 6 months, and they turn into rock stars. And I think a huge problem we have that I think we don't talk about at all out there is, once you have minorities and you have women and in these roles at companies, how do we nurture them so they feel part of the company and the culture, and they feel respected and they don't leave? And I have seen and experienced myself more times than I can count. It's not antagonism, it's this underlying current of, did they get the role because of XYZ? Or did she get promoted because of XYZ? And it's just simple. It should be just something simple as, she's in a role of a CISO. I've worked my tail off to be in that role of a CISO. But I always find, speaking from a woman's perspective, every woman I know in this industry constantly has to address and overcome these preconceived notions about how they got that role. And it's just like,
and how they're perceived, right? I mean, I was talking to one of my directs today, and she was being very direct with a group of people, and she and I were talking about it, and I even said to her, do you think you would have gotten the same? I would have gotten the same response if I had said the exact same thing that you did. And the answer is no. No, it would have probably been, Matt really knows what he wants, and he's really direct. And for her, it's like, why are you being so aggressive? And it's.
But Matt, not to cut you off.
Nope.
I think Larry touched on it. Olivia hit it right up front. A lot of it is not people trying to be malicious. It's really unconscious bias. It's the way we were all raised, right? So I'll give a perfect story. I was a CEO of a company called TechStrong. At the time, we had like 500 employees, in downtown Clearwater. And right after I took the job, one of the guys who was a very close friend of mine who worked in the company, we were out having beers down the street one night. And he says, Julian, you talk Black and female, but you hire white. And this is a white guy from North Carolina with a very heavy drawl. If you talk to him, you would swear he carries a Confederate flag around everywhere. But one of my closest friends. And the point he was making to me is look at our hiring practices. Yeah, and this is right when we were starting, actually, Larry, when we were starting ICMCP. He was like, you are the CEO of a company with 500 employees, and we still go to all the Ivy League schools to do our recruiting. We do all these things, but where are you really reaching down? And of course, I was upset at first because I'm a Black guy and I just got accused of basically being a racist with hiring people. I don't know what they call it, reverse racism. I don't know what it is, but it hit hard. And the next day I got with him and we met for 2 hours. And then I went back to the company the following, because that was a Friday. That following Monday, I met with my human resources folks. And I said, I don't want to change what we're doing for recruiting other than we need to become about how we recruit. I don't want to stop going to the best schools, but here's some schools and some other things that we need to add to the mix of things as we're looking at people. We started looking at how could we anomalize resumes more to the point where we didn't take away somebody's skill sets, but we didn't allow someone's name or school that they went to also put them in a barrel of they're less than someone else. With ICMCP, when we started, as Larry knows, it was very important to us to have white people on our board, specifically for this issue. One of the things I tell people all the time when I speak is I said, look, before we start this discussion, I don't want anybody in the room feeling bad because they're a white guy. You were born that way and that's fine. What I want you to feel bad about is if you weren't aware of these issues, and I want you to do something about it when we leave the room.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
I think you hit it right on the head, Larry, and that is, it's not an HR problem. It's not a people aren't applying to our job posting problem. It's a leadership problem. I believe that leaders don't know how to hire for diversity other than to ask HR to go find me more diverse candidates and to look at the pool of candidates we have to say, is there some diversity in it?
You're right about that.
It is not a HR problem. It is a leadership problem.
Well,
and
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I'm going to let you finish your point, but I'm going to disagree with you, and I'll tell you why.
Okay, good. I definitely want to hear your perspective on it too. And I don't mean that HR isn't part of the problem, but when we talk about diversity training, although at least what I've received is not really helping managers understanding how to, what you were talking about, Larry, about what are the ways to write a job description? How many people we discriminate against when we put a certain college degree? We always overstate educational credentials, I think.
Credentials, background, always.
It's ridiculous.
It's a unicorn problem. We want this person. Well, they don't exist no matter what diversity or not.
And I'm not going to pay them. No, we need the unicorn that's free.
Yeah, that's free.
Right.
It's cheap. So I get my point is I love what Julian, you said about going out and being part of the outreach, being part of the let's go find and help those people find us. Whatever communities we can reach out into. And I say that I'm sure there's a million ways I could have done this better myself as a hiring manager, but it is a leadership problem. That's my point.
Yeah,
So,
so
Larry,
I'm
please
not.
jump
I'm
in
going to
there.
disagree with. So I'll put 2 points. So yes, it's a leadership problem, but HR is also a part of the problem. And when I say HR is a part of the problem, right? Because you did say it. You said it's not an HR problem, but then you said HR is a part of it. So it's a leadership problem from the standpoint. I agree, because leaders aren't taking an active role in driving HR, right?
Mhm.
Because what they do is they say, "Hey, I need a role." HR, I want somebody diverse, and then they expect HR to just do it. They expect that HR knows how, has the processes, right? They are the talent management people. They are, right, the human resource people. They are the one that is going to help understand, right, this whole people problem thing, because that's what they do. So yes, there's a leadership problem because the leaders don't lean forward and get actively involved in making the change and forcing HR down the path that they need them to go. But HR is also a problem because HR has not chosen to get out of their own way and operate differently, right? So I took on the role of the president of ICMCP at the beginning of February, January 31st to be exact, right? And so at that board meeting, when I raised my hand to do it, I knew that there was going to be a lot of conversations that I needed to have. So one of those conversations I started having was with hiring companies. And as I began asking them about what are they doing to hire diversely, all of them have said, well, we're doing what we've always done. We go out there and we post our resumes. We post the jobs out there and we pull resumes from, Dice and Indeed and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, so what is your expectation? If you're doing things the same, how are you expecting different results? Well, we sort of think that by doing that because we want that HR is going to then weed out and find the diverse candidates that are in there and present them to us. That's what the hiring managers honestly think. And that's what's not happening, because there are a couple of things that get in the way. So let's be clear. Cybersecurity gets paid well. And on the scale of technology jobs, IT's here, cyber's about here. And so because of that, when HR is looking at salary bands, because most Fortune 2000 companies have some sort of salary band that they grade everybody at, when they say, oh, this job is going to make $100,000 a year, oh, here are the requirements that must go with that job. So if we as leaders aren't going in to talk with HR and say, hey, HR, we're unicorns, and I say that jokingly, but I believe it, right? In cybersecurity, that we are unicorns. We're unicorns, so you can't grade us the same as you grade everybody else. That 100K band, you can't put the same requirements on that as you, because I can have a senior SOC analyst or mid-level SOC analyst who makes 100K. But you're not going to have an IT analyst who's going to be making that same amount of money, even though if they're tiered as right at the same. And so it's got to be this balance. But leaders, to your point, have to lean forward. They have to recognize when we go in to be a CISO, when you go in to be a leader in an organization, you have to take some ownership in certain things. And one of those is how you staff and helping to drive and educate HR of how to build better requirements to meet your needs as it relates to getting diverse candidates in.
You have to also educate, Larry. I mean, let's be honest, we have to self-educate. We have to, going to your diversity meetings, and those are all very important, but we have to self-educate. We have to talk. I think the biggest thing I get from this, and Heather, I really want to go to you in a second because of some of the stuff you and I have done in the past, and I've watched you do, but the conversation's not happening. And I think a lot of people in this industry, a lot of people in general become very defensive. They'll ask a question like, well, I don't do that. Well, nobody's accusing you of doing anything, but one of the things that I didn't know, because how would I ever know this until just a few years ago, a colleague of mine said one of the differences between men and women is a man may look at a job and go, I could do that even without experience. Where she was telling me that a lot of times a woman may look at that same job with the same qualifications and go, well, I don't meet every one of those things, therefore I'm not even going to apply. And that at the time was mind-blowing to me, but I could have been very defensive and said, well, that's just crazy talk. I have a lot of women who work for me, instead of us sitting down going, we're going to rewrite these descriptions so that problem goes away. Tell me when the problem goes away. Heather, you've experienced this. I know you do a lot with Cyber for Girls. what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, well, I mean, first of all, I want to say, I mean, I agree with so many of the points that have been made. And I think that an underlying point here is that there isn't a single answer to, you know, or a single action that can be taken to build a more diverse and inclusive workforce. It takes all different types of initiatives, many of which have been mentioned tonight. But Matt, to your point, I agree with you 100%. On the point of women not applying to jobs because they feel that they have to have 90 or 100% of the requirements that are listed in the job posting. And so going back to the point of educating people about cybersecurity isn't, you know, that's not the only requirement. There's a requirement to educate underrepresented populations on how to get into cybersecurity. And one of those things is exactly that you know, we need to make women aware that, guess what, you don't actually have to have 100% of the requirements under your belt before you apply for a job. And you know, experienced folks like us in the industry, I believe we have an obligation to help them understand that they do have the skills. So I'll just use the example of veterans. Veterans often struggle with how to translate, you know, they want to transition into a field like cybersecurity as they move out of the military. But guess what? We in the industry, we see how they have relatable skills that are, you know, perfect for working in cybersecurity, not the least of which is ethics, right? And I guess that's not a skill, that's more of a characteristic, but they often need help from folks in the industry to work through how to translate the skills they've developed in their military service to you know, applying those to required skills in cybersecurity. And that's just one small example. And then, you know, that we've talked a lot about about speaking up. And that I just want to say that I think when we witness behavior that is not conducive to building a diverse and inclusive workforce, that we all have to be upstanders, not bystanders. So,
Agreed.
So for example, when I see, you know, when I attend a conference, or even, you know, I'm at the point in my life where I kind of say what's on my mind, because I figure I have nothing to lose at this point. And, you know, when I see a panel that's full of white men, I am not afraid to speak up and say, where are the women? And likewise, you know, Larry, you might stand up and say, wait a minute, why aren't there any black men on this panel, or any black women, or, you know, any women of color, et cetera, et cetera. We've got to stand up and say, why does everybody look the same? Because that's not what the world isn't made up of people who look the same.
Couldn't agree more. And I got to be honest, we also, as a white male, have to stand up and say, this is ridiculous. We have to change the scope. And since you brought it up, you know, I love Larry and Julie and the organization you are have founded and run to help the minority community. For veterans, there is Hiring for Heroes, for example. There are organizations out there to help, but we in these leadership roles really need to help people get into the proper mindset. You know, one of the things I loved, Olivia, about you talked about marketing, that's where you came from. I'm a trained psychologist. That's what I would plan to be when I grew up, until I realized I don't like listening to people. And Larry and I used to talk years ago that probably not the career for me. But I think that's the other point is, I think a lot of people in that education feel like, if I did not study cyber, which did not exist when we were in school, high school, middle school, or university, if I wasn't a technologist, I cannot be successful. And you all have said it. What we need to get out there is, I care about two things about an individual in an interview: your passion and that piece of your anatomy that sits between the back of your skull and your eyeballs. That's it. If you show me passion, you ask good questions, you show me that you have done a little bit of research about the topic, about me maybe, about my organization, about the job description, you ask good questions, I don't want experts, right? Experts you still have to train, and sometimes they're harder to train because you're undoing this.
Yes.
So
Preach.
Because of the timing here, and Alan, real quick, and I know we could talk about this all day. I love this passion. So I guess the questions, we all understand this is a problem. We all understand it's gotten better, but let's be honest, 20% minority right now in cybersecurity, depending on what analysis, 11% female in the industry. To me, we have a long way to go. And we have a long way to go to change perception, to get rid of the stupid stereotypes. You have to be a math wizard to be in cybersecurity. We're all cyber. When's the last time you had to do algebraic equations? I'm the master of PowerPoint, Excel. I mean, let's be honest, right? In speaking. So what do we do?
Well,
so go ahead.
No, sorry. Were you addressing that to Larry?
Yeah.
No, it's just everybody.
It's anybody. So for me, I'm going to use a couple of things, right? So you brought up the point of leaning forward, right? So our white male counterparts who make up a large part of this industry leaning forward, right? So I use this analogy a lot because I think it begins to resonate with people. If you think about the March on Selma, if you think about the Black Lives Matter marches that happened earlier this year, right? It took a rainbow coalition of people, not just the people impacted by the event, but the rainbow coalition of people to stand up together and all say, this is a problem.
Yeah.
That's what it takes now. It takes not just minorities and women standing up saying this is a problem. It takes the collective of all of us together standing up and saying this is a problem. That's number one. Because once we do that, once you see more people, right, that aren't being impacted by the problem, also leaning forward because they recognize it's a problem, then holistic change begins to happen, right? So that's the first step. A second, and there are a million steps that can go behind that, but for me, I think that is the first step that has to happen in order for this to really take effect. Because if it's just minorities and women, right, standing up, saying that this is a problem, it will sit and fester, and it'll fester because you'll still have the unconscious bias, and you'll have people saying, they're just complaining, look at the numbers, I see them everywhere I go, right? So look.
As an example of that, just real quick, I'm sorry to interject here, but it's interesting, that came to light, it proved itself a few weeks ago. I posted something, what I thought was innocuous, just basically saying, on LinkedIn, basically saying, if somebody has a job, please, stop questioning whether they deserve that job. Give them a fair chance. Treat everybody equally. Talking about women and minorities. And I received so many emails on LinkedIn from people I didn't even know, women especially, Black women, saying, thank you, because they were so upset that a few months before, all these companies were saying, we're going to change things, Black Lives Matter, and we're going to put all our efforts and all our money into this, millions of dollars, and we're going to change things. And they were frustrated because nothing happened. And they needed people to stand up for them and say things like that on LinkedIn. So even little things like that, that you can do every day, which takes no time at all, means a lot to a lot of people, a lot more than companies just saying they're going to do something.
I'm going to jump in there.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alan.
Heather, you go first.
Heather.
No, you go, Heather.
Okay, all right.
Heather.
Listen, what I was going to say is that I think that I'm personally tired of talking about the problems. And I think we need to just focus on the solutions. And we all, folks like us who are so passionate about this topic just need to get out there and keep doing the work that we do and get in front of people and help, bring other role models along with us. So for example, one of the things that we've been doing a lot of when we work with our Cyber Day for Girls program is we call on our early professionals to come talk to the girls, right? So in other words, we use a near to peer kind of format because the girls can relate to them. We were talking a little earlier about how, societal role models that we all saw in front of us as kids. We're doctors, lawyers, dentists, police officers. Well, it's the same today. The kids today have the same societal role models. There's nobody walking around with a cape saying, I'm a cybersecurity professional, or, you know, I fight cybercrime. But wouldn't it be great if there were? Because then all of a sudden those role models would be in front of the kids. We have to help get them in front of kids in order to build awareness. And by the way, frankly, it's not just kids. We have to build awareness amongst people of all ages, because a big part of the problem is the adults in the kids' lives who don't know enough about cybersecurity in order to talk about cybersecurity intelligently enough to help kids understand the plethora of opportunities that there are in this industry. And that, as you said, Matt, guess what? You don't have to be a math whiz. You don't even have to have a computer science degree necessarily. Some of us do. I'm not one of them.
Well, I love that. So one of the things that I've done is I've actually gone into churches to do cyber safety, right? And so I get a bunch of parents who come in for cyber safety because they have kids, right, who are online and on their phones and everything. And I spend about 15 minutes giving them a cyber safety course, right? And just helping them understand things that they can do as a parent. But then I flip it to educate them about, hey, right, did you know about this career field of cybersecurity, right? Have you ever spoken to your kids about it? Did you know that this is something? And I go into that. And you would be amazed at how in these underserved communities, how few parents know about the field of cybersecurity, because they are, in most cases, blue-collar professionals, right?
Yeah,
they are blue-collar professionals working in areas where they don't come across that type of thing, so they don't know.
Only know it from movies.
Well,
right.
The other
thing
is
the dude in the hoodie.
But the other piece of that, can you guys hear me?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The other thing that Larry, though, is I go back to the point you made earlier, and Heather was making it as well. Is it's all about awareness, right? It's not just awareness on the part of the group of people that we're after, but it's also awareness on the part of the people who can do something about it. It's both sides of the equation you have to think of. Even in today's environment, now that, you know, some universities are starting to offer cyber programs and stuff, most people still don't start their IT career thinking they're going to end up in cybersecurity. It sounds like none of us on this conference call started that way. I was a jazz performance major in college and a religion minor. And I went in IT, and then because I'm old enough, I was one of the first people to go from the information security to cybersecurity switch. Right, I was there in the early 2000s, where, you know, back in mainframe days, we didn't worry about security too much. It was all enclosed in one thing. But the more we wanted to get data as to many places as possible to do business faster and to react faster, and the internet was never designed to be secure in the first place. It just got more and more porous, and then the problem began, and I happened to be there at the beginning. But I go back to something my father said to me, and of course he didn't create it. It's hard to be it if you can't see it. And so one of the things that's most important to us with ICMCP is to make sure as kind of fathers in doing this, I'll use that term, Larry, you know, the way we started, it was actually Devin Bryan who had the idea. He's now the CISO at MUFG. Devin called me one day and he says, hey, I want to meet with you, and I'll meet with you in Tampa where you live. He says, but we got to do something about the makeup in the meetings that we're in. In my case, I'm an entrepreneur who went into cyber. Or, well, I'm a cyber guy who became an entrepreneur. There were very few Black CEOs in cybersecurity. I mean, at the time, people that you knew, there was maybe 3, I think. And so when Devin came to me, he says, look, I'm experiencing the same thing in corporate America, and we need to do something for women too. But Julian, we got to change to make up these rooms. And I need access to your Rolodex to get started. And she'd be nice if you'd write a check to help too. And so I had to put my money where my mouth was, because I kept talking about it. And then I had to get the passion in action. But the key thing that I tell a lot of these young people and women when I meet them is it's not just about getting mentors who look like me. When I started my career in New Orleans in IT, all of my mentors were white because there was nobody Black in our department. There were very few women. And so it was white guys who said, gee, I think this kid's pretty smart. I think he can add more value. Let me not just help him with his technical skills, but also his soft skills so he can learn what it means to work in corporate America. And I think, as that is my history, I think that's what helps a lot of people, is just reaching down, or reaching over, I shouldn't say down, to help other people become aware of what it is. Because once they see it and they know it, it opens up a door for tons of possibilities.
I think we should continue this, and I will throw one thing in there, and I'll hand it back to you, Alan. One of the things that
I'm ready to stop yet, Matt. We got more time.
One sec. One of the things that we should also do for ourselves, mentoring people that don't look like us is a good thing.
Absolutely.
But getting a mentor for ourselves that does not look like us is game changing. I promise everybody watching this, my mentors do not look like me. And what I have learned has helped me tremendously in my career, in my personal life, my friendships. It's been eye-opening.
I agree 1,000%.
So there you go. Alan, I'll hand it to you.
So let me, you know, Larry, we started off with you getting real. I want to kind of finish it off with me getting real. So if you can't tell, I'm a white male. Hello, my name's Alan. But here's the thing. You know, Julian, I'm closer to your age than Mitchell's my age too. Heather, you're not as old as you think you are. You know, but I was there also, Julian, in the early 2000s and the 1990s as well. And I have a background as well on this. But it's very hard as a white male. It's one thing to be sensitive. It's a thing, something to be sensitive to the glass ceiling and to women. It's a thing to be sensitive for people of color, right? When you live in a white dominated world and you're the one or two person in the room. It's one thing to be sensitive. It's another thing to walk a mile in their shoes. And I think that when we talk about leadership and we talk about, why it takes leadership, there's a lot of people who's and I'm sorry on the Zoom video, this might be going slower, but there's a lot of people whose lips flap and they have the best of intentions, but they haven't walked a mile in those shoes.
Exactly.
And until you walk a mile in those shoes, it's really hard to understand. When you're black or a woman and you walk into a job interview, there's no hiding it. You know what I'm saying? I'm Jewish, right? People look at my face, they know I'm Jewish, but well, you are too, Olivia, but you know what I mean? But I could pass, right? A black man can't pass, a woman can't pass. And so as sensitive as we want to be, until that day is over, where when you walk into an interview, Olivia or Heather, and the man interviewing you doesn't look first at how you're dressed and how short your skirt is and what your legs look like and your hair or whatever, or you walk into a room, Larry, and they say, oh my God, this is a big black guy, I'm intimidated or whatever, right? Until that day's over, this is going to be an issue that we keep talking about and talking about and talking about. And if we don't recognize that as truth, you're all kidding yourselves.
Exactly.
You're all kidding. That's what we got to hit on.
Alan, one of the things to think about also, we also need to scream louder that when we are part of diverse teams, when we work in environments that facilitate this, where everybody's passionate, nobody's self-serving, nobody's worried about, well, you're telling me, and Julian, I love the way you said it, you're telling me I should feel bad because of the way I was born, which is never the case for anybody here.
Right.
We should be talking about the success. Diverse teams, end of story, do better. They do better. Diversity of thought, background, color, creed, sexual preference, all of it makes a better organization, makes a better team, no matter how you think about it, and makes better lifelong friends. And we need to start screaming those successes, because those people that are in organizations in leadership positions that are not on board, that can't get out of their own way and have that really unfortunate viewpoints, they're going to start seeing other organizations that think better grow and be more successful. And that I think is going to be key as well, hopefully.
Yeah. Right. I want to bring up one company I've run into, and it's not in the cyberspace, they're in the development space. But these people help HR companies recruit developers. They come out of Singapore. And if any of you have been familiar, Julian, you've been around the world. If you've ever been to Singapore, it's truly a multiracial, very, female entrepreneurs. And they do a good job in Singapore, is the bottom line. But this is a company that comes out of Singapore. They've recently also now opened up in London. And this is a concept, if we can figure out the cyber equivalent to it, I think it's great. You got a job, oftentimes for developers, part of the job application is you got to submit some code. They give you a problem, write some code on, right? And even the people looking at the code know that it's a guy named Larry Whiteside Jr. or a woman named Heather who submitted the code, and already they have notions in their head, right? These people just make it blind. It's machine graded code, and it tells you who the best. If you're saying you're hiring a candidate to do this kind of code, or this kind of skill, it tells you who wrote the best code, and you don't know who that person is, whether it's a man or a woman or a black person or a white person or a Southeast Asian person or what have you. It just tells you who wrote the best code. Well, what can we do to unfortunately, to take the humans out of it a little bit and get to who's the best qualified for this?
That's happening.
Well, go ahead, Larry. I'm sorry.
But so there's some of that happening, right? So there's some of that where they're utilizing cyber ranges, right, to create testing mechanisms for candidates that they want to bring on board in technical roles. But the thing you have to understand is our field is so broad that works well for technical roles, but it doesn't work well for these non-technical roles, right? Additionally, we aren't completely taking the other characteristics out. We're utilizing that as a factor, right? So those organizations I know doing it are utilizing that as an additional factor, but they aren't taking the other characteristics out. And so it's a challenge.
And if you don't fix the rest of it, you're not going to keep them. You may get them in the door that way, but you're not going to keep them. If the unconscious bias is still there, or any of the other things this panelist talked about is still there, they will come in the door excited. They will be out the door 90 days later.
Absolutely.
Well,
Pay bias is another factor.
Yeah. Well, what I would tell you though is even the test itself, in the way it's laid out, also has bias built into it.
Sure.
And I know of organizations that have tried this. The issue that you run into, so in Singapore, it's a lot easier, even though it's a very diverse environment. You have 3 primary Asian cultures and white people. and math and science is very important in that environment. And so using a test is kind of a way of normalizing things there in that fashion. The issue you have with cybersecurity, especially if you're looking for people who are new to the field or more entry level, it's how do you construct a test that tells me what they can learn, not necessarily what they know.
What they know, yes.
That's the issue.
It doesn't help with the 2 things we care about: it's the passion, right, or the big thing those tests tend to fail in that, especially in our world. And with Larry and I, what we used to do when we worked together, it was all about that passion, that ability to dig and dig and dig. And you remember those nights? We would be there all night.
Nights.
We had to be because we wanted to be. And the joke was who was going to drink the largest big gulp, right? Because it was work all night because we wanted to be there. We wanted to be together. We wanted all to do this thing. It's passion and learn. So
then it goes to Larry's point earlier that you need to be around people that do this so you can mimic and see that it's possible for yourself, and so you can get recommended by your network. And that's why organizations like ICMCP, they're so critical, because they have that network for minorities who can refer jobs to them. But again, if you're from an environment where you don't have the ability to form those relationships or see that people like you, look like you in these types of roles, then it's a lot harder for you to get your career started in this field.
But it goes back to what Larry said at the beginning, it's education.
Yeah.
Got to know it exists. Heather, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, because I just thought something you said, Olivia, just made me think of something. You know, I think that because of the pandemic, with everybody working from home, we actually have so many opportunities in front of us right now.
I agree.
And one of them is reaching, you know, diverse communities, remote communities, underrepresented communities. You know, of course, there is one qualifier, and that is that they have reliable internet access, which is a whole other conversation, because there is, we know that we have a digital divide. But that issue aside, we can reach people right now remotely through technology that we might not, you know, otherwise have the opportunity to reach in a face-to-face environment. So I think we need to take advantage of that right now.
Yeah, instead of people like you taking an entire day to speak to one school, you could do 10 schools in a day.
Yep.
Right.
Alan.
I got to cut it, guys, because we're way over time. I will mention that there are many high schools with cybersecurity programs now, including one right here by my house. But that being said, rather than going around the room and thanking you and last comments, here's what I would like to leave our audience with. Larry, what's the website for your organization?
Thank you. It's www.icmcp.org.
Okay, so check that out. Sounds great. Have at it. Heather, I know you're running, was it Cyber for Girls? Is that the name of it?
Yes, Cyber Day for Girls. And if people want to learn more about Cyber Day for Girls, go to IBM, of course, IBM.org.
Oh, awesome.
Great.
Yep.
Olivia, I would mention to you, and I'll mention it too, I have a good friend, Chenzi Wang. Chenzi was a VP she's a CISO. I think she's been on our show before, many of our shows over the years. And Chenzi runs a great women CISO group that Olivia, I'll make an introduction. She's now, and Chenzi started her own women-run venture firm called Rain Capital.
Yep. She's no longer at Splunk?
No.
No, she left a while ago.
Oh yeah,
she started a VC, a little venture firm herself that she's running. She got some good backing for her.
Yeah.
I'm really happy.
It's called Rain Capital, and Chenzi's great. Should have been great to have on this panel. Actually, I'm doing a women's CISO panel with Chenzi and the Jody, our associate producers, putting that together. But anyway, guys and gals, men, women, thank you so much for giving us a really great discussion. We could probably go on for another 2 hours here and not even scratch, but there's something to it. Take it in, look at it. We'll be back in another 2 weeks for another CISO talk. We'll announce the sessions. But thank you very much, everyone. Mitchell, as always, Matt, as always, my co-host.
Thank you.
Julian, one more time, we got to get you in here.
All right.
This is Sybil for CISO Talk. Take care, everyone.
Thanks,
everybody.
Good night.
Bye. Good night.
Bye.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. Today is January 14th. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon here with the headlines for you. First up on DevOps.com, we have an article that talks about the role of automation in web testing and some of the challenges that are associated with automated web testing. You know, automation is beneficial in web testing because it can boost a team's productivity enhanced software quality, and accelerate time to market. But web test automation also allows testers to verify and validate the functionality of a web app's UI and backend features, which we all know is super important in ensuring a high-quality user experience. But it does come with certain challenges that teams must overcome, including long test script execution time and complexities in testing various UI elements. This article details the things organizations need to consider when adding automation to their web testing and some of the ways they can mitigate the challenges through processes and tools. Also, we have an article that looks at how managed detection and response solutions can benefit DevOps. MDR is typically defined as an outsourced security service that enables organizations to better detect malicious activity over the network. And it can be a powerful ally in the quest to contain cyber attacks, but only if it's deployed correctly and leveraged properly. In the world of DevOps, MDR can enable teams to get ahead of the latest threats by keeping developers informed about evolving threats and vulnerabilities, as well as incorporating tools for continuous cybersecurity into the development and deployment pipelines. It's a technology that might be worth investigating to either jumpstart or bolster your organization's DevSecOps efforts, as it is a tool to secure the DevOps environment as well as a tool for developers to make code more secure. In news, Internal has launched an on-premises edition of its eponymous no-code development platform aimed at simplifying application development backlog reduction for enterprise IT organizations. Low-code and no-code is quickly becoming another route for organizations to get applications to users faster by enabling non-developers to build simple apps without the aid of developers. The on-premises edition of Internal's platform makes it easier for users, both developers and non-developers alike, to work with databases, APIs, and applications that reside behind a corporate firewall. This is just the latest example of the growing ubiquity of low-code and no-code in enterprises, as development teams struggle to keep up with the growing backlog of projects, many of which are now must-haves rather than nice-to-haves in the new remote work normal. Internal is just one of many companies swimming in the low-code pond, so I expect to hear more about low-code as the year progresses. All right, over on Container Journal, Red Cubes is making the community edition of its Otomi container platform, which automates the deployment of a curated Kubernetes environment, available as an open source project. The Otomi container platform provides teams with an opinionated approach to deploying a set of tools for Kubernetes clusters. The tools are aimed at IT teams looking to automate the deployment of a complete Kubernetes environment, including DNS servers, ingress controllers, and certificate provisioning. And Grafana Labs has added a free tier to its Prometheus monitoring cloud service, which enables IT organizations to more easily monitor a fleet of Kubernetes clusters. The Forever Free plan provides IT teams with access to up to 10,000 Prometheus or Graphite metrics, 50 gigabytes a log capacity, and 14 days of retention for metrics and logs that can be accessed by up to 3 team members, which is enough to monitor 10 Linux servers running a couple of Kubernetes nodes, according to the company. The company also made changes to its paid plan, including support for 5 times as many metrics, as well as a pro plan that offers 15,000 metrics with 13-month retention. Adoption of Prometheus has grown alongside Kubernetes and is gaining traction in other IT environments as well. Although Prometheus actually predates Kubernetes, IT teams now using it in Kubernetes environments are recognizing the value that Prometheus brings, which obviously is good for Grafana. All right, over on Security Boulevard, we have an article that looks at the 4 steps healthcare organizations can take to mitigate future cyber attacks. We all know the security issues that have plagued healthcare organizations, and the COVID-19 pandemic has not only stretched healthcare organizations' IT resources thin, but have also exposed security vulnerabilities that hackers have since exploited. But healthcare organizations can take some proactive steps to conduct security assessments and find vulnerabilities in their networks. By building a robust and properly defended clinical environment, risk of healthcare cyber attacks are lowered. All right, that's all that I have for this edition of the Headlines. Please check back on Monday when I'll have a fresh batch for you. Until then, have a great day. Stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with Saket Modi, who is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Lucidius. Is that correct, Saket?
That is correct, Charlene.
Oh, perfect. Excellent. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on your show. It's an honor to be with you on the same set. Thank you, Charlene.
Oh, thank you. Tell me a little bit about Lucidius. Are you guys a brand new startup?
We've been a startup which has been around the block for a while, but we used to do security services, Charlene. We used to do hacking as a service. So we used to take the permission of these very large Fortune 200, 300 companies and hack them with their permission. We've pivoted from that, or I would say we evolved from that. And we actually now have a platform that we've been working on for the last couple of years, which predicts cyber breaches that can happen within organization. So as you know, the whole world is moving from detection to prediction. We are the ones who actually help organizations objectively or measurably tell their boards how much are they more secured than where they were in the past and predict breaches. So that's who we are, Charlotte.
Oh, that's great. I cannot think of any time in our history when something like this technology would be more welcomed by the industry at large, especially, if you think about the fact that so many organizations have employees working remotely now because of the pandemic and the just the number of ransomware, for example, there's the number of ransomware attacks has increased like exponentially. It's like hundreds of percents. And the idea that an organization could actually kind of get ahead of its security posture and the possibility of being breached, I think is it's a great technology. So when did you guys get started on this, and really what made you kind of pivot, if you will?
Yeah, so we started almost 3 years back building this platform. The reason why we made the pivot is because most of our customers were telling us common problem statement that they are facing, Charlene. When you look at any large enterprise, any Fortune 2000 company anywhere in the world, it typically has between 15 to 25 cybersecurity products today. Mm-hmm. It'll have an antivirus, it'll have firewalls, it'll have vulnerability assessment systems, it'll have a SIEM. There's a long list, right? And the problem is every product gives its own dashboard, tells its own story, and tells you the alerts that you need to work on. Unfortunately, there's nothing that consolidates all of it together and actually tells you the probability of breach that you're sitting on or the likelihood of breach. And that's really the only question that the CEO and the board of directors really care about. So because we were doing security assessments for some really large companies around the world, they all had a common problem. They said, Saket, we like the reports you give us. It has a lot of findings, very, very interesting and very, very informative. But it's not just you. It's the same thing being done by my EDR solutions or my firewall, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is there's a lot of these signals, and I don't have one aggregated platform which can actually consistently take all of these signals and then build it into one unified metric. And in a very simple way, which is non-technical to understand, explain to my board, my CEO, and my CRO that this is the breach likelihood, because that's what the CEO cares about. With everything that you're doing, what is the probability that we will be breached in the next 12 months?
Well, that's it's interesting that you kind of tailor it to kind of the non-technical crowd, if you will. I mean, it's one thing to throw all the reports and statistics over to your CISO or your CIO or even CTO. They probably would have a pretty decent understanding of what the reports are telling them, but you give it to a CEO. I mean, not to say that CEOs are not technical in nature. I mean, there are plenty of them, but say you've got a CEO of, I don't know, a shoemaker or something like that. They might not be so technically inclined. They might not understand. So I think having it in words and graphs or however you present the information in a way that is understandable, I think is going to be very well received in the marketplace. Now, do you guys only work with organizations, businesses, or do you have a consumer type offering as well?
Charlene, till last week, my answer was a different one. Today, it's a different one because we just launched this brand new product. Because today, because of the pandemic, because of the new way of working, we feel that any enterprise solution which doesn't cater to the consumers, because you're working from home today, you use the same cell phone both to talk to your boss and to your friends. You use the same messaging app to do, conversations to your office colleagues and your family, right? That's the reason why we've been traditionally only looking at your enterprise cloud infrastructure, enterprise on-prem servers, laptops, desktops, et cetera, we thought that there has to be a focus on the people element or the human element, which today contributes to more than 90% or is a part of at least 90% of the breaches which happen today. And we said, when we go to the people route, how can we only look at their enterprise angle? While today, with the whole new way of working, the intersection or the cross section of enterprise and workspace, which is personal, has almost disappeared. So today, we actually have a platform, Charlene, that we launched just last week, which actually provides a breach likelihood score. In other words, a safe score to every employee of an organization. And while we were building this application called Safe Me, a lot of our own engineers, my own architect came to me and said, you know what? I want to know the score for my daughter. I had my engineers come and tell me, one of these engineers who said, you know what? I know this neighbor of mine who's a retired 80-year-old grandfather, and he's very active on Facebook and Instagram, and he just got duped for a few $1,000s by some scam, pranksters and fraudulent people. And I want to give this same technology to him so that he can protect himself with the right awareness training, knowing how secure is the mobile phones, what data about him is exposed in the deep and dark web. And that is what made us say, hey, why just enterprises? Why not create a free of cost application, very easily available both on the iOS and the Android store, which can enable all sorts of audiences, going all the way from the grandfathers and the grandmothers, all the way down to a 8-year-old who's actually using the cell phone for the first time, and their parents are worried that, I don't know the right way of making them ready for the digital journey that they will be they're going into. So that's the reason why we launched this brand new application called Save Me, because we did not find anything like that in the consumer space, and it's free of cost, and it's available both on the iOS and the Android app stores, Charlene.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. I'll have to download that for my stepfather. So, and myself and my son. So there we have it. So does this technology does it just kind of help you understand what your cybersecurity posture is and what your the possibility of a data breach, or does it actually help you kind of mitigate any potential data breaches, such as, finding information on the dark web or something like that? Does it offer any sort of mitigation, either via, an automatic mitigation or something, maybe offering steps that you can take to do it yourself?
So, Charlene, in the famous words of John Doerr, measuring what matters, you cannot fix something if you cannot measure it. So the first step is knowing how exposed you are, knowing where you stand by taking quizzes in terms of your own cybersecurity awareness quotient, if I can call that as. Knowing how secured is your device. That's step one. Now, to your point, how do we help? How does the app help you in order to mitigate a lot of these failing controls or controls which can have an impact to your professional or personal lives? So the overall score, Charlene, is divided into individual vectors. There's a dedicated vector of awareness. So you get hundreds of 3-minute Netflix-style videos, only 3 minutes. So if you want to know how do you secure your Instagram, or you want to give that to your children, you can just tell them and they will just see a 3-minute video, and it'll have some screenshots and animations which says, do this, do this, do this, to actually protect your Instagram account. And then they take a quiz. And you can actually see whether they cleared the quiz or they did not clear the quiz.
Okay.
So that is what in the video itself, we say, how do you mitigate it? The second piece on the device security, whether your device is vulnerable to a man-in-the-middle attack, somebody snooping your data, is it jailbroken? Does it have the latest operating system? It will not only check that, it will also tell you what are the steps you need to take in order to mitigate those controls. So it does tell you that. However, you have to do it manually because, Charlene, the architecture of the app is as such. It's not a mobile device manager. It's not an MDM. In other words, it doesn't take over your phone. It cannot change settings on its own. That's the nature of the app, because we said when we want to go to consumers and at a day and time when consumers are more than ever aware of their privacy rights that they've got, it's wrong to create an app which will be able to, because if I can change a control to make it better, remember I can also change it to hack you. So in the first place, we said we don't want to do it, we'll tell you how to do it. So that's second. And the third piece is the deep and dark web exposure. So you will be able to see all your passwords in clear text of where your passwords have been exposed. Unfortunately, when your passwords are exposed to the deep and dark web, Charlene, there's nothing that you can do, even if you're the president of the United States. All you can do is change your own passwords. You cannot go and delete those passwords because there are gazillion copies of that data which is already made. So therefore, it actually tells you, and the moment you say, yes, I've changed this password, your score actually becomes better. So, and it scans it every day. So anything new that comes out about you, you immediately get that as a pop-up. And for consumers, the beauty is it's all free of cost. So you can just go and play around with that and see what is your cyber exposure.
Well, that's great. I think, especially in cybersecurity, the adage knowledge is power is I don't think it's true in any other place more than cybersecurity. So, Saket, thank you very much. That's great technology. I'm definitely going to check it out myself.
I'm glad you like that, Charlene. And this is something brand new, which we don't know any app provides on the App Store or the Play Store. And the beauty there is that not only does it give a new way, but it actually weaves into the enterprise story, because we've already been giving a safe score or a breach likelihood score to every laptop, to every desktop, to every server, to every database, to every cloud resource that you've got already for the last few years. I'm just complementing that with giving a score for every employee of your company. And remember, your holistic score is all about people, process, and technology together. And then you get a holistic cybersecurity breach likelihood, which, by the way, we also convert to the dollar value risk that you're sitting on. So that when you take it to your board, going back to our conversation, you're not just saying my breach likelihood score is 4.1 out of 5. You're also saying 4.1 means $760 million of potential dollar value risk in the next 12 months of losses that can happen with what and how things are, Charlotte.
Interesting. I love it. Saket, thank you so much for walking me through it. I think I wish you guys the best of luck. I think it's a great technology, and I hope it's very well received in the space. Is it? It's for companies of all sizes, I'm assuming, not just the enterprise. So, good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, Charlene. And again, the beauty of keeping it out there, starting from a free of cost version, which is for consumers, for enterprises, keeping the small and medium businesses in mind, we actually priced it, and it's public on the app, therefore I can talk about it. It's $3 per employee per month. So even if you've got like 10 employees, all you pay is like $350, $360 a year, and you make sure that those 10 employees are secured. So the price range really works for employees, where you get a centralized dashboard with all employees and their scores, and you can run campaigns, and you can run phishing campaigns, and a lot of stuff that can happen. And yeah, that's the reason why if you add all of that together, Charlene, the final intent is to go ahead and enable a complete re-engineering of the cyber consciousness of every individual. Because if you think about it, today you have over 3 billion people on the internet around the world, and the number of people who've been trained or who have been, structurally put on the internet is probably less than 0.01% of that number. And that's the big problem. And that's the reason why your awareness, your exposure, your device security, your phishing clicks and links, and a lot more comes in together into a Bayesian machine learning network. And then we say, what is your cyber consciousness quotient? And we want to re-engineer that. So that's the intent of what we are doing, Charlotte.
Nice. All right. Well, Saket, thank you very much for walking me through the technology and your product. And again, I wish you guys the best of luck with it.
Thank you for having me on your show. It's an honor, Charlene. Thank you so much.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Kelvin Coleman, who's the Executive Director of the National Cybersecurity Alliance. Kelvin, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to see you.
Charlene, it's great to be with you today.
Well, I have just a full palette of topics that I want to go over with you today. We've had so many security shenanigans happening lately. I honestly don't know where to start, but let's start, I guess, with COVID, which kind of is like the topic of the year, if you will. It seems like every other conversation I have these days is really focused on cybersecurity and COVID-19 and kind of the way not only organizations are viewing security in light of the pandemic, but also how the pandemic has actually kind of advanced certain cyber threats. And so interested in kind of hearing about what you guys have seen, the NCSA has seen, and then kind of where you kind of see the whole, COVID-19 data privacy conversation going in the new year.
Yeah, thank you again, Charlene, to be able to talk about that. COVID sort of exposed a lot as it relates to cybersecurity. One, it exposed that folks are not really as secure as they need to be. When you talked about entire enterprises, right, entire ecosystems, be it academic, be it healthcare, be it small, medium-sized businesses, having to transition to the online platform, at the beginning of COVID, many were just wholly unprepared for that. Not just the accessibility of information and not just having their products that are now, accessible, be it a teacher trying to get to her students or, again, small, medium-sized business trying to stay in touch with her customers. So that was one issue. But the other issue that we could see from our perspective at the National Cybersecurity Alliance was the lack of security as it relates to getting those things online. It goes without saying that the first sort of instinct for those folks was to just get it online, get it accessible. Right. Not security necessarily. And now many are coming back, so we had a new word added to our lexicon, right? Zoom bombing, right? What exactly is that? But we found out very quickly, if you don't have a secure webinar, then folks could at least bomb you with something inappropriate, and at most be there and you not even know it, right? And be gathering sensitive information. So that is one thing we learned throughout COVID in terms of just people are not as secure as they should have been. The other thing we learned is the absolute importance of telehealth, right? We know a couple of years ago, about $30 billion or so in investments in telehealth. In the next 2 years, conservatively, we're looking at $250 billion, $250 billion in investment as it relates to telehealth. So COVID really sped that up, right? In terms of getting people to really think about how to properly do telehealth. Now, I must admit, my friends in the healthcare industry did a great job. Now, was it perfect? No, but we're not going to let the good be the enemy of the perfect, right? I think that's how that goes, Charlene.
I don't know. So.
In terms of it doesn't have to be perfect, right? But we're striving and getting as best we can to get those systems up. But they did a fabulous job, and that's continuing to evolve. So I think those two areas in particular, right? People not being as secure as we would like for them to have been, they're certainly catching up. And certainly telehealth and how that is really blasted upon the scene in the last several months, and not going back anytime soon. That genie is out of the bottle. Telehealth is here to stay.
Well, that's a good thing. I honestly believe that's a good thing because really, who wants to go spend 4 hours waiting to see your doctor, sitting in a doctor's office? So if you can do it online, then do it online.
That's right.
Yeah, but do you think that this is really going to be kind of a watershed year for cybersecurity in terms of investment and in terms of innovation?
100%. Without a doubt. Absolutely. Now, it was already, pretty innovative industry in terms of really trying to do some great stuff to not only keep people secure, but again, just the technology itself. But a situation like this, like COVID, like the global pandemic, really causes you to sit back, well, not even sit back, but rush forward and say, okay, how can we do this better? And so we are going to see some amazing things come out of this situation. Now, the irony is that the bad actors, right, the cyber malicious people, are not necessarily doing anything new, right? Phishing attempts, Charlene, are still at top of the mind for cyber malicious actors, right? Bad actors. Just a simple phishing, certainly spear phishing, business email compromise. These things are still very popular among bad actors. And so, we're still having to not only talk about the products and processes of stopping a cyber attack, but also the people and the behavior and how not to click on certain stuff if you don't know where it's coming from, if you don't know origin or you don't know who's sending it. And so COVID has also exposed that, right? The products and processes are great. And there's some great products out there. We have a number of those companies on our board at the National Cybersecurity Alliance. Processes are fabulous as well. Both industry and government working together with organizations like the National Cybersecurity Alliance. We come up with great processes like the NIST Cybersecurity Framework.
Right.
But that last piece, Charlene, again, people, I think this year has really come into focus in terms of we really need to spend more time on the people part.
I agree, and I believe that the spotlight on security since the pandemic begins, data security, cybersecurity in general, I think is going to do wonders, and has already had an impact on the level of awareness that employees have towards security. Whereas before, they might have thought that their company's spam filter might catch things, or the phishing emails never would actually hit their inbox because they would have been, grabbed by whatever threat detection protection software that their company is using. But now they realize, in a sense, in many ways, they're kind of on their own to detect and mitigate those threats on their own. So I think that the education has always been something that's obviously been very necessary, but this year, or since the pandemic, it's really, really become kind of top of mind for a lot of organizations. And I think employees now are embracing it more than they have in the past.
Very well said. I've seen it time and time again with top CIOs and top CISOs. They are talking about exactly what you said, the education piece, which they want to put more calories into that.
Great. Well, as long as they put the more calories there instead of elsewhere, I'm okay with that. Okay, well, let's kind of shift gears a little bit, because I do want to talk a little bit about the recent events that happened at the Capitol. When unless you've been living under a rock, that there was a huge riot over at the Capitol, and insurrectionists gained entrance into the Capitol building and ended up stealing, or at least accessing, government devices. And we have no idea what the security implications are from those actions, and what kind of data is now possibly out there in the wild because of that. So you are right there in Washington. So what are you hearing, and what can we expect in the weeks and months to come because of this?
Yeah, Charlene, great question. I'm glad we're going to talk about this, because just in general, anytime there's a physical attack, a physical compromise, physical security compromise, I automatically assume that there's a cyber compromise as well. Not necessarily through backdoor remote engineering, or someone has taken control from thousands or hundreds of miles away. I assume there's a cyber breach because of the very thing you asked in terms of devices that have been stolen. And I automatically think, I pray those devices have been, password protected, some multi-factor authentication on there, because an open device on Capitol Hill, that's a different ball game. And those devices, are out there in the wild. The first thing, after talking to my friends on Capitol Hill, and they call and get my advice on it, the very first thing I said, Charlotte, you have to get an accounting of what you're missing, right? You have to identify what even you're missing. And while that may seem simple, Charlene, as I think about it, if, someone broke into our office, God forbid, or my home and took devices, I would have to seriously sit down and think about what devices I have. Mm-hmm. Right. We have so many devices these days. The average American household, around 8-9 devices. Right. And so many more devices in many households. So you'd actually have to stop to think and get an inventory of what was taken. And that was the same thing I advised our friends on Capitol Hill. Find out, as best you can, what was taken. So you got to identify that first. Secondly, you have to recognize and see if those devices, were they password protected? Was there some sort of multi-factor authentication on there to have accessibility? And some will say, well, no, we have biometrics. Well, there's always a roundabout to get around the biometrics, password or whatever the case is. Great that you have biometrics, but what else did you have? And lastly, I will say, some have said to me, well, I don't know if the rioters went in with the knowledge of, we're going to take some devices while we're in there. But I'm going to assume they did think that, though. And some have said, well, what are they going to do with those things, Kelvin? They can sell them to bad actors, to nation states. Washington, D.C. is full of folks who would be very, very interested in those devices. And I wouldn't doubt for a minute that we had some bad actors within that crowd from foreign nations within that crowd who stormed and was looking for exactly that. So a very bad storm that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, and I think to your point, the fact that that data is valuable to a number of different parties, even if those who took, I mean, I do believe that for many it was a crime of opportunity. They were in there, they saw it, they grabbed it, but they probably had no idea what implication though that particular action had beyond the actual taking of the device. Bad actors could be from nation states. They could be from countries that are not necessarily our friends. And if they get that sensitive government data, who knows what they can do with it? So, if it were up to me, I would just kind of call the whole thing a loss and just wipe the data if possible. But I know that's kind of impossible until you actually know what is missing, what devices are missing. So I do agree that I think, taking that inventory of what's gone missing is probably the most important thing to, at least to start the ball rolling on kind of making things right. But what do you think this, the implications this has for government security in general? I mean, we've, between this and then last month we heard about the SolarWinds data breach, and that impacted a number of federal agencies. And that is still it's an ongoing issue. We really still have no idea how deep that breach runs. So, it seems like it's not been a good year or good month or so for cybersecurity in the federal sector. So where do you think this kind of puts cybersecurity in the government sector? Where do they go from here? I mean, it's kind of hard to say that it can't get worse, but I don't want to say it can't get worse because Murphy's Law and all that good stuff.
Well, we're having a great conversation. I know you'll appreciate the back and forth. I'll push back just a little bit, Charlene, that yes, it has been a horrible last month or so. But I will look at the successes that government has had, led by CISA in particular, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, notwithstanding what some may say in terms of fraud and abuse and, an irregular election. From a technical cyber point of view, it was almost flawless. We know and prove that there were no votes flipped and nothing done. And so CISA, along with FBI and others, led that charge to make sure that was the case. And so at least that's off the table now. You can argue other things about signatures and, after ballots arriving after election day and all that. But from a technical viewpoint, Chris Krebs and his group did a really outstanding job of helping to protect the election. Now, to your question, though, in terms of what's next for government, we see this evolution with every administration. Apparently, with the Clinton administration, they had like a handful of connected computers at the beginning of his term. And what we think, that can't be possible. Well, he came in only 2 years after Y2K. And if you remember Y2K, Charlene, and the whole idea that the computers were going to crash, do they think it's the year 2000, the year 1900? We had no idea. Think how far we've come in 20 years. And since President Clinton, we had President George W. Bush, and he escalated a bit more in terms of our cyber defense. And then with President Obama, he escalated even more because he had to, right? We were just becoming such a technical society. And now we're coming with President Biden. He's really going to have to focus on this, he and his administration, because 5 years ago, Charlene, about 15 billion connected devices around the world, right? Today, 2020, about 20 billion connected devices. My South Carolina math tells me that's about a 25% increase. In the next 5 years, same time period, going to be conservatively 60 billion connected devices, a 300% increase over the next 5 years. Now, the last 5 years, a 25% increase. And I'll take that any day with anything, that I'm doing, particularly when you're trying to sell products. 25%, that's a healthy market. 300% in the next 5 years of connected devices. And we're going beyond the Internet of Things. We're now getting into the territory of the Internet of everything. The ubiquitous nature of artificial intelligence, which is going to be really key, conversational platforms. And so the Biden administration is really going to have to focus here and make sure Americans understand what this technology means to them and their security, because industry is not going to slow down anytime soon, nor should they. Right? We want more devices. We want more accessibility. We want more capability. But as Moore's law comes into effect, which really doesn't serve us well here, you get it faster, you get it stronger, and you get it cheaper. Right? And so we know that that's working against us in terms of Americans having that capability. So the administration is really going to have to focus on making sure that we understand the implications. To your point earlier, the rioters went in and maybe didn't understand what they were doing in terms of the device. Maybe not. But we need to make sure the American people know, globally actually, that this new technology comes with some responsibility, and we need to learn how to use it securely.
Good points. All very, very good points. And I think, as we enter 2021 and we do see a new administration come in, I think we will see some changes. Obviously, you're much closer to it than I am, but I think the writing is on the wall when it comes to just the advances in technology and how Americans, particularly Americans, have really kind of embraced a lot of these technologies, and they're not moving back. They keep pushing forward. So the administration really needs to recognize that. And but I also wonder if the federal government needs to kind of instill some guardrails, if you will, around the speedy advancement of technology, because I think we may be moving faster than we can handle from a cybersecurity perspective. I'm wondering if maybe we need to kind of maybe not take a step back, but maybe give security a much deeper thought in building and advancing technology than we have in the past.
Yeah, that last point, I completely agree. I don't agree with industry should slow down, right?
Yeah, no.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, right.
And again, nor should it happen. But your last point in terms of government having a much more targeted, much more focused effort on, making sure people know how to use these devices securely. I think that's in order. If you think about, only you can prevent forest fires, right? Public service campaigns that have served us well over the years. Ticket or Click It, right? A great service, public service campaign. Driving while intoxicated is just not good. It's against the law, right? These public service announcements we've had, Charlene, over the years have been very effective, right? We need one for cybersecurity. And I think at the National Cybersecurity Alliance, we are trying to lead the way in that particular area with our member companies and the government. This past October, we had Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Do your part, be cyber smart, right? Those type of things, while they may seem like, oh, okay, that's cute, or whatever the case is, but it's a reminder. It's a public service announcement to say, really be careful with the link that you're clicking on. Make sure you're coming from a trusted source, and making sure you're not putting your information in a fake, a website. Make sure you're using the website for that company you want to do business with, or better yet, go ahead and use their app, which is much more safe. When you can, use a credit card as opposed to a debit card, because it's easier to get the money back if you happen to fall for fraud. Things of that nature, Charlene, are so important for Americans to know in terms of just a number of ways that they can help secure themselves and their family. But to your original question, the government has to really, really step up here and make this a top priority, not just one among many priorities. This should be a top priority, because again, that genie is not getting in the bottle anytime soon. Remote education, telehealth, here to stay. So how do we help people to stay secure while we are doing these things?
Well, I'll tell you what, let's have this conversation again in about 6 months or so after the new administration is in. Maybe they've made a couple moves. Let's get an update from you in a couple months. Sound good?
Oh, that'd be an absolute pleasure. It was really great talking to you.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much for being on TechStrong TV. I really do appreciate it. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, here now with the Thursday edition of the webinars preview. As always, I tell you, we have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Here are 3 that are happening in the next few days, and hopefully we can get those on your calendar and you can join me for them. The first one is happening on DevOps.com. It's called The Psychology of Chaos Engineering, and it is happening Tuesday, January 19th at 11 a.m. Eastern. It's sponsored by Gremlin. This one sounds really, really interesting. I'm very excited about this one. This webinar will take a look at chaos engineering from the human perspective and delve into both the positive and the negative outcomes to all groups of people involved with chaos engineering. That includes the users, the engineers, the product, and the business owners. Julie Gunderson, who is a DevOps advocate at PagerDuty, she is going to discuss some case studies from organizations where chaos engineering has been implemented and explore some of the changes in attitude that these practices create. As I said, I'm really excited about this webinar. I hope you can join me for this one. The next webinar is called A New Year's Ransomware Resolution. It's happening Tuesday, January 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern over on Security Boulevard. It is sponsored by Axio. And we've all heard about the increase in ransomware over the last year as the COVID-19 pandemic forced companies into lockdown mode, and hackers took advantage by targeting pretty much anything, including hospitals, research organizations, global manufacturers, you name it. It's been brutal, to say the least. But in this webinar, Axio is going to demonstrate what it calls the world's first comprehensive ransomware assessment technology based on hundreds of real-world events. I hate to say that, hundreds of real-world events. And they'll also discuss some topics, including how you can combine the learnings of the world's top analyst and DHS guidance, why you should evaluate your susceptibility to ransomware based on fact patterns, and how you can get started with the Axio 360 free ransomware assessment. All right, finally, happening, let's see, Tuesday, January 19th. Yeah, that's when it is. Last webinar I want to let you know about is called Shift Left with NGINX Layer 7 Security. It's happening Tuesday, January 19th, as I said, at 10 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. Yes, 10 p.m. Eastern. It's sponsored by NGINX, which is part of F5. I'll be moderating this one, so I hope you'll stay up with me as we look at security in the DevOps processes, including best practices to defend web and layer 7 applications against a range of application attacks, such as XSS, SQL, injections, and threat campaigns, and more. How to identify and stop untrusted bots that help malicious actors to automate their attack. This is the security as code idea, how organizations can start sooner and help security to shift left, integrating into application development CI/CD pipelines. And finally, how to gain insight of overall security posture of your organization. So good stuff, good stuff. Hopefully, as I said, hopefully you'll stay up with me and check out this webinar. Check out all 3 of these webinars and all the other webinars that we have coming up across all the sites. You can always check DevOps.com, SecurityBoulevard.com, and ContainerJournal.com to see what our lineup of webinars is, both upcoming and on demand, because we have a ton of them on demand as well. All right, that's it for this edition of the Webinars Preview. I will be back on Monday with a fresh new batch. Until then, have a great day, and as always, stay safe.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. Next up, we have a conversation between Mike Vizard and Sky Cassidy, who is the CEO of Mountaintop Data, talking about challenges IT organizations face in embracing best data ops processes. So let's give this one a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Sky Cassidy, who's the CEO for Mountaintop Data, and we're going to be talking about data ops, DevOps, analytics, the whole smorgasbord. Sky, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about this stuff. I love it.
Well, I don't know if everybody knows who Mountaintop Data is. I don't think you're quite a household word yet. So why don't you give us a little insight as to what the company does and how did you wind up in the middle of this conversation in the first place?
Absolutely. So we provide databases for business-to-business marketing. So we provide the contact information basically when people want to run a campaign, reach out to new prospects, people they don't already know, and get new business for their marketing team, for their sales team, that kind of stuff. That's our primary service, is kind of managing, creating, maintaining that type of contact information.
So what are you seeing with trends in data? There's a lot of people want to build applications faster. What are you guys struggling with as you look at the data landscape? There seems to be no shortage of types of data, and we're asking people to do minor miracles. What's going on?
Yeah, something that's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine is pronouns. It drives me nuts in marketing. In so many things, it's important not to have confusion. And I feel like people overuse pronouns. I have conversations constantly with employees where I'm having to tell them, stop, back up. Who's he? You can't start the conversation with he. I need to know the name of the person. I don't know what you're talking about. You're referencing a conversation we had earlier today that you think I'm going to remember. I don't. You're going to need to, you can't just pronoun everything, assuming everybody knows. It's kind of a me-centric thing where you're like, well, of course people know what I'm talking about because we talked last week about this, so I can just reference it. You're like, no, you have to use the actual word. Data, and kind of my thing with data, is telling people to treat that word like a pronoun. You can't just say data. And technically, you can look it up. Nobody's going to say it's a pronoun. It's got, there's a lot of debates around data and whatnot, but it's been used to the point, in my opinion, that you can't just start a conversation talking about data. Like, what data? There's so many vast different types of data. It's this massive umbrella. It's like saying things. Okay, if you always say things and you never reference what type of things, what kind of business do you do? Things. Okay, you're in the mob. Like, what? Why would you just answer things? Data is kind of the same thing. You just say data. Like, all right, you're in some sort of shady business then, because you're not going to tell me what you do, because that means nothing. So I encourage people to use kind of layman's terms in data for what they do. I did a write-up recently on what I called 6 types of data. Anybody who works in data will freak out when they hear that. It's not for them. It's for your average everyday marketer or something like that. It's not a data scientist. To be able to talk and have people understand what they're talking about, remove confusion and waste in conversation in businesses when they don't know what data they're talking about. Every department has its own type of data and they'll think that's what you're talking about, basically. So that's kind of a big mixing up my business of data with my personal irritation with the overuse of pronouns, and telling people it's great, use pronouns, just use them properly. And when you say use the word data, treat it as if it's a pronoun. You have to say, what is it? Marketing database? Is that what you're talking about? The CRM data? Okay, now I know when you say data what we're talking about. But if you just say that word, then people, you're all going to be thinking something different as you move forward, and that creates problems.
Do you think that we don't really have a lot of mature processes in place for the way we manage data, secured for that matter, or anything else that we do with data? It seems like it's all over the place and no one correlates it. And there's a lot of talk about data ops these days, but I'm not quite clear people even know what that means. So what's your sense of our overall maturity when it comes to managing data?
It's a bit of a mess. Some companies have it really well handled, others don't. The details matter so much that, and then once something gets polluted a little bit, that's just how it is. You know, once somebody enters a value in a spreadsheet or missorts a spreadsheet, back in the day when you could sort an Excel spreadsheet and it would just sort the one column, and then you keep working on that data, that information, and you find out 2 months later somebody missorted it somewhere along the way and nothing lines up properly anymore. I mean, you have those kind of issues with data where something gets wrong at one point, or there's just not enough depth of information. So you're thinking this means this is a lead, but you don't have any type of lead scoring to know, well, I mean, this is a lead. This is just somebody who typed garbage into a form versus an actual qualified lead. So then you come up with marketing qualified leads and sales qualified leads. But if you don't have enough depth of information like that, and you're reporting, again, let's say in reports, the data that's in a report, you get down to the quantitative data where it's just, here's the numbers. Here's how many sales we had. Here's how many. But if you don't have the information behind that, then it doesn't really mean much, and it gets confusing if it's not standardized. And we're in the middle of COVID right now, and you see all this information coming from all around the country, from all different people with all different outlooks on how this stuff. And since it's not standardized, it doesn't really mean anything. How many cases were there in this area? Well, one place is recording a case in this way and another in this way and another. So yeah, you have information, but if it's not standardized in some sort of way, it gets pretty messy. Data is a very messy thing if people aren't really on top of it and making sure it makes sense and scrutinizing it all the time. So as valuable as it is, any type of data, when I use the word generally, I will reference all data. The people dealing with it have to know what they're doing and know what the information they're looking at actually means.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that this is holding up a lot of application development work? Because we talk to developers all the time here, and they're always rushing to build an app. But it seems like the minute they get the app built, then they go looking for data. It's such a mess on the other side that all their efforts are kind of for naught. So how do we kind of get to the point where I can build an app quickly, but also get to the data that drives the app?
Oh boy. Yeah. I mean, I think they're doing a decent job of that. I would say what really matters there is having a good team. This is why it's so important to have a good team. People think they can get something very inexpensive and just and get it done, and get people who can write a line of code, but they don't really know what they're not professional at it, let's say. So they can write a line of code that works, but it's not going to hold up over time. You wonder why, hey, how come I can't just go write code to do what this big, why can't I just go out and write Twitter real quick and have my own Twitter? Well, you can find plenty of developers that can do this kind of stuff, but if you're not crossing the T's and dotting the I's, and if instead you're crossing the I's and dotting the T's, it's just not going to work so well. It's going to fall apart. You're going to have all those kind of issues. And with data, things add up really fast, and you can't tell unless you really dig into it. And that takes work. And again, talking generally about data, just about any type of data, you start out saying, great, we're going to create this, and it's going to, it works. But now we have 100,000 users, 1 million users, and now these little spots that we weren't paying attention to or weren't collecting the information that we were going to need, things just start falling apart once you're successful because you cut corners in getting there. And I would say, if you're talking about application development, we have a data search application, sales and marketing database search application, let's call it, to be clear. And we deal with that kind of thing all the time. Is this stuff going to fall apart once it's used? It works now, but how do you stress test this to make sure? I mean, how to stress test it, but you have to stress test it and say, what happens when we have all this? Now, what happens when you have all this information put in there? And people find little things like, oh, wow, turns out there wasn't a limit put on this field or in this table. And this stuff just piled up until it filled up the physical memory on this, or something, and then everything crashed and we couldn't figure out why. And when you fill up physical memory, things crash in bizarre ways that are really hard to track because they just kind of, there's no consistency in the failures, because you overlook some detail. That's getting a little bit away from data, but getting to the having good people. It's why a good team is so important, and having people who really know what they're doing. And you can have lower level people who have some skills, as long as they're managed also by good people. Companies that really succeed have very talented people who get things done and get things done really well and know what they're doing. There's a reason for that.
What is your sense of AI these days and all the hype that goes around that? Because it seems to me all of this is dependent upon the data that's being fed into those models, and the models may be biased, the models may be wrong if the data is wrong. So is there going to be a greater appreciation for what's required to manage data as we go forward? Or is data such a mess that we're never really going to get this AI thing right anyway?
No, we'll get the AI thing right. AI can actually help with the mess of data really well, probably. So that's an encouraging thing there when you're looking at, we have not, I wouldn't put it in the realm of AI by any means, but algorithms for doing things like, and this will get to the kind of discrimination, which is a loose word there. This isn't people saying, we don't like this group of people or this type of person. When you talk about AI discrimination, it's a data discrimination that's kind of built into the data sets that you grab. But so here's an example of that. We have an algorithm, and you're constantly tweaking algorithms, but so we have an algorithm that we're always working on for identifying if we have people's first and last name in the right order. And again, this isn't AI, but it uses a data set. And the main data set we use on that is our own database of first and last names. And one of the major metrics we look at is how common is this name in the database. Now, we also have tables of known common names and of known issues with names and all kinds of other stuff that are taken into consideration, and a couple outside tables of the common names and first name, last name. Now, one of the issues is, though, foreign names. Okay, our database is mostly Americans, mostly people born here with American names, but there's a decent amount of foreign names in there. And how does it handle those names? And so if we create the program saying, great, let's go off our own table. We've got, 100 million first and last names, and most often Smith John and John Smith, we're going to have it right most of the time, not wrong most of the time. So we can use that to say, oh, this is a very common first name in our database, and this is a very common last name, and you have the algorithm work off that. But what happens when we get a foreign name that isn't common in our database, and we don't know that first name or last name and how to treat it, and it can just, and then you end up doing something like creating data where you say, I'll grab a country, India. That's a pop. We have a lot of contacts in our database from India probably versus any other country that would have this kind of issue. Now we have a data set maybe where the people who are working in the United States with Indian names are misrepresented. We have their names backward. And so maybe they don't end up making it into our database because if you have their name backward, a lot of other stuff is going to get wrong and they're not going to be in. So suddenly our data set is discriminating against people from India or people with Indian names. And that's kind of how that kind of thing works. So you go off an available data set, but you don't realize that data set has built-in issues. Because nothing's perfect within data. You have what you have and you try to use that. But, with that example, another one I use for AI is, so you take facial recognition and you're trying to have it identify if somebody is, looking suspicious or something like that. But you only use people from your dorm room in Wisconsin, to program the faces or something like that. Now, when it sees faces from other countries, it's going to think they're making expressions they're not, because it's going to look at an Asian face and it's going to look at a black person's face. And I think that's the type of thing when people talk about AI discriminating. It's just using a data set that's incomplete because it's what's available to you because you're in the group you're in. So yes, you always have to watch out for that and try to build for it, and just be careful that you don't lazily use a data set is probably the biggest thing.
And the data sets themselves are changing more frequently. There's more types of data these days. Seems like a lot of the models will have to be continuously updated as I get access to new data, or conditions may change entirely to make the algorithms themselves somewhat outdated. How do I kind of navigate all this stuff from your perspective, or what are you guys thinking about?
This is where I think the real smart people working on AI and machine learning particularly are going to do a lot of good. Because from what I understand, and again, I'm not an expert, we have a podcast, the FU Market podcast, and we have some AI people on there sometimes. And so I scrape a little bit of their knowledge when they come on. But when you have something like machine learning where you can create and machine learning people, just like data people, when I talk about data and try to make it in layman's terms, are going to hate probably what I say here. But you can create this feedback loop where you're basically looking at the result saying, is this the right result? And then so you have the human element still in there to help continually program it. And then if it's the right result, you let it learn off that. And if it's not, then you throw that out and you say, hey, don't learn from this. So you can catch issues in data and actually have machine learning and AI help correct things, help identify something like, hey, you have an issue with people from India in your database, because it'll identify itself that we see a pattern here in these names, and they all seem to be from it'll just probably go crawl the internet and find out what's common about them. And what's common is, they're all from India or from that part of the world, and come back to you and say, hey, there's an issue in the underlying data set here that then a person can go and fix, or who knows, at some point, maybe the AI will even go out and find data set. So being able to identify issues within the data that it's using itself. And there is some human interaction in there to look at something and say, hey, there's an issue here, and help it, let it know what answer's right and what answer's wrong occasionally to help reprogram and identify issues.
So you talked about people. So what's your best advice for bringing together developers? And I got a bunch of IT guys who are kind of running the back end data ops, and I got a bunch of data scientists and some AI wonks. What's your best advice for bringing all those folks together?
I would say try to make them excited about their job, because you can have somebody who's really good at their job, and if they hate it or they're not excited about it, they hate it, they're going to do a really bad job, most likely. It's human nature. You can say, yeah, but why don't they just do a good job anyway? Okay, well, maybe 1 in 100 will, but you're going to be dealing with a ton of them that don't. Then you get on to, they tolerate their job, they need their job, they're afraid of losing their job. And then you get to the point where they're excited and motivated about their job. And I would say that almost, if not all, progress and innovation comes from people who are excited and motivated about their job. It's why entrepreneurs do so much. People say, why? Now, what's the secret here with startups and entrepreneurs? Well, they're run by people who have almost an insane motivation to do whatever it is that they're doing. So they're going to do it really well because they're up all night working on it, not because they're afraid they're going to get fired if they don't have it done for the next day, because they really want to do it. Like when you get somebody who this is their passion, this is something they're excited about, they find purpose in their job, then you can take your average employee and turn them into a really good employee. If they don't give a damn about the data set, it's going to go to crap. But if you get somebody who's really excited about keeping that data set clean and having it be accurate, and they find, the way maybe one person's really into puzzles, well, this person's really into data, that's the person you want on your team. And then you want to motivate people to be like that, to love their job, be excited about their job. And it's not just like having Taco Tuesday or something like that. You have to find out what really makes them excited. Are there really smart companies out there that will take people and say, what do you want to work on? Okay, that's what you're going to work on. Why? Because maybe some other time there's just things that have to get done. But if you can afford to have people work on what they want to, great. And then when you're hiring, think of that. Okay, here's what I want somebody to work on. Great. Find somebody who really wants to work on that. But that's what they want to do, and have them do that. Forcing people to do work that isn't what they want to do has to be done sometimes. We all have to do work we don't want to do sometimes. There's things that have to get done. But the more you can get people working on something they're really excited about, especially in the work from home stuff nowadays, they'll be working around the clock from home if it's something hey, this is their thing. This is what they're really into. And they'll come up with something amazing. They'll come up with something new. They'll come up with patents or something for stuff, even patentable things, because they're into it. They're immersed into it. And I think that's kind of the key for at a higher level. At a lower level, just don't have people hate their job.
All right. Well, there's that old saying about do something you love and you'll never work a day in your life, right? So you just got to align those folks and get them going. Hey, Scott.
I would disagree with that. I would say do something you love and you'll be constantly working, but you'll love it. Like, don't think it's not a party. You're still working, but you're going to love it. You can call it work. That's fine. Or call it the thing that have this bizarre compulsion to do at all times.
That hopefully somebody's giving you some money to do.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Sky, thanks for being on the show.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, back to you in the studio.
I'm back, baby. You know who I am. And if you don't, you can kiss my shiny metal ass. Yeah, 2020 has been a jerk of a year, but thanks to Mom, us robots are immune from COVID. But what about 2021? What it does hold in store for DevOps, digital transformation, cyber, and cloud native. We have assembled an out-of-this-world cast using the latest artificial intelligence to cue you in. Predict 2021. This great virtual event is happening on January 21st and 22nd, 5 hours a day. Check out the great speaker lineup and register for free at predict2021.com. There will be great prizes, exhibits, interactive moments, picture booths, and maybe even a chance to win a drink with a robot. It's all free if you register now. Go to predict2021.com for all the info. Don't be a jerkwad. I'll see you at Predict 2021.
All right. Well, that wraps another edition of TechStrong TV. I hope everybody enjoyed today's show. Don't forget, we have the Predict 2021 Virtual Summit coming up next week, January 20th and 21. So please be sure to check that out. Just go to the website, predict2021.com. That's predict2021.com. Check out the lineup of speakers. It's going to be a great event. I highly encourage you to check it out. Until then, we'll be back on Monday with another edition of TechStrong TV. Until then, I hope everybody has a great weekend. And above all, please stay safe. We'll see you next week.